March 10th, 2021. And I'm going to ask for a motion about the minutes of February 24th for approval of the minutes. Sarah, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. John.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I have a motion and a second. And so now I need to go down the list. Hold on, let me get the list out. We're having a great time today. Okay. It is Maureen.
Maureen has not logged in.
Okay. Amy's not logged in yet. How about Adrian?
Yes.
Okay. Carolyn.
Agree.
John.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Andres.
Abstain.
Sarah.
Yes.
And Crystal.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you all. And we do have a quorum of 6 people and we are ready to start. So I'm hoping that everyone can join us. But we're going to, before I get started too far, I do need to read the declaration. So I will do that now. I, Brenda Shear, Chair of the Planning Commission, hereby determined that conducting the Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. The World Health Organization, the President of the United States, the Governor of Utah, the Salt Lake County Health Department, Salt Lake County Mayor, and Mayor of Salt Lake City have all recognized a global pandemic exists related to the new strain of the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. Due to the state of emergency caused by the global pandemic, I find that conducting a meeting at an anchor location under the current state of public health emergency constitutes a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. So, John, would you like to give everyone a little briefing about how to use the website?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Commissioner. So we're grateful to have everybody here. It looks like Amy got in as well, so that's a great thing. So welcome. If you look at the slide above, obviously we're holding this virtually. If you're having any trouble, if you can hear us, but you're having trouble communicating, maybe logging in or speaking, you can always send us emails at the email address at the bottom of the screen, which is planning.comments@slc.gov. And we will have people that are monitoring that email address throughout the meeting. During the meeting, when it comes time for a public hearing, and if you would like to participate, you can indicate that you'd like to do that. By doing that, if you look at the very bottom right hand of your screen, there's a little tiny icon, and it looks like a little hand like this. If you click on that, it will indicate to us that you'd like to speak. So once you have spoken, if you would click on that button again to remove that hand, that'll help us move more quickly through additional public hearings so we know who would like to participate and who would not. I also just want to take 1 minute and introduce our new member of our administrative staff. We have Aubrey Clark here.
Hi, everybody.
This is her first week and definitely her first meeting. So let's be kind to her this meeting, and to the best of our abilities, we're going to make this work. So thanks everybody, and Commissioner, if you wanted to start the rest of the agenda, please feel free.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we are going to move to the report of the chair and the vice chair. I do not have anything to report. Amy? Is Amy in the meeting? Is she enabled? Yes.
I just unmuted her. Amy, are you there?
Oh, thank you. I have lost my mute button for me to do it. I do not have anything to share other than I'm having some serious technical issues tonight.
Good. Well, let's hope you can stay in the room long enough to do the agenda. Is the report of the director? Nick?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot prepared, but I think as most people know, the legislative session ended last Friday. And there were some pretty significant land use related bills that were passed, and so we will be doing a update on what that means for the Planning Commission over the next meeting or two, depending on how fast we can put something together. But some of the bills that did pass will require some changes to city processes and codes to reflect that. So look forward to that, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Our first item on the agenda is a bit of unfinished business, which is not a public hearing, so I will just go ahead and call the planner, Casey Stewart, to come and present.
Yes, good evening. So I provided you with a memo with the information you requested from the last meeting. This item comes from the January 27th meeting. The public hearing was closed and the commission tabled it and requested additional research into the legal status of the road called Canetta Court. A few parties have looked into that. The city surveyor has looked into it, and the applicant's title company, Cottonwood Title, they have both researched it and determined that they cannot say who the owner is specifically, but we do know it is not a city street. Some of the lots along Canetta Court have right-of-way access over it, and that is described in their deeds. Other lots along Canetta Court do not have that right-of-way access described. So some have explicit access, some have not so explicit access. The subject property on the corner, and I'll share my screen here just to refresh your memory. So here's an aerial image of the lot. So this lot would have as much right to use Canetta Court as the other lots on the on Canetta Court that do not have explicit access. The lot has utilized Canetta Court to access its parking for years. So at any rate, we're kind of back to where we were at the beginning. It's considered a private alley by the city. You are aware of the issues raised by the neighbors related to parking and emergency services. A number of neighbors are concerned. I provided some emails that I've received after the public hearing. I provided those to you in your Dropbox. If you wanted to look at those, you'll have to decide as a commission how you want to handle those. But planning staff continues with its original recommendation to approve the plan development to create another lot from this existing lot and allow for the construction of the proposed duplex. As a note, the applicant has reduced the number of bedrooms from 3 for each unit down to 2 for each unit in an attempt to somewhat mitigate the parking demand placed on Canetta Court. So with that, I'll respond to any questions you have.
So our task here this evening is to actually, I did not tell you the case number, so I will do that now. Case numbers PLN SUB 2020-00413 and PLN SUB 2018-00679. Our task is to determine whether to go forward with a motion to approve this subdivision, or to or whatever other action we want to take. So, commissioners, except for your discussion.
We're the decision-making body on this, right? I mean, anything beyond us would be appeal to
Would it be,
District Court.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
It would be appealed to the appeals hearing officer first.
Right.
One quick question. This is Andres, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly. I guess the findings that we have before us are that this is a private driveway, I guess, or a private street, and so the city doesn't have any kind of overseership in that regard. Is that correct?
Correct. The city doesn't have any ownership interest in it, although they do provide garbage services. And I understand they've provided snow removal in the past. So it seems that there's been a checkered history of the city's involvement in it, but it is not a city alley.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason for plan development is because we're creating a lot without public access, correct? And there's no other standards that are being modified to accommodate this proposal?
Correct. It complies with all the typical SR3 zoning requirements. It's merely the fact that Connecticut Court is not a public street.
So is the agreement to reduce the units from 3-bedroom to 2-bedroom? Well, how would that be baked into our approval? Should we approve it? Or do we have to separately list that as a condition?
You could list
Or
that as a
can we?
condition. It's the applicant has submitted that, so that it's understood that that would be the case. But if you want it to be very clear, then you could put it in a condition.
And the applicant isn't proposing to reduce any of the off-street parking that they will provide on the 2 lots. Is that right?
Correct.
Or 3 lots, I guess. Okay.
Okay, commissioners, I will entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Thank you.
Based on the findings listed in the staff report and the testimony and plans presented, I move that the planning commission approve the, oops, I've got the, is this the right one? Yes, IRA 1024 LLC Plan Development Edition PLN PCM 2020-00413 and preliminary subdivision plat PLN SUB 2018-00697. Subject to the conditions listed in the staff report and the following condition that the units be limited to 2-bedroom units with no changes to the off-street parking plans.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, John.
Question before you vote. Commissioner Bell, you're talking about not reducing the parking. That they do have the flexibility to add 1 more stall potentially.
Okay, no reductions. Thank you. Thank you, Casey.
Okay.
No reduction in any proposed off-street parking. I modify my motion.
I'll second the new motion.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion from Adrian and a second from John. It was slightly amended. So I will go down the list. Has Maureen arrived?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have.
Okay, Maureen,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Adrian,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
John,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Andres,
I will vote yes.
Sarah? Sarah?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. And so thank you very much. It's unanimous. So we'll now move on to our public hearings of the Planning Commission. Our first public hearing is for the ground lease area at approximately 1269 South Legacy View Street. It's case number PLN PCM 2020-00845, and the staff member is Chrissy Gilmore.
Commissioners, if I could maybe interrupt you for a minute. I think we're having some weird glitchy issues. So I kind of
Okay.
want to, I hope if Paul and Nick are listening, we've been getting emails where people are required to have a password to enter in as an attendee, which is not normal. You should be able to just attend. And so I've gotten emails here, and then we've had several applicants who haven't been able to get in without that password. Is that a concern, or do we want to keep moving forward? I just want to kind of address the situation now.
We know this because people have submitted emails or some other method of communication.
Yeah, I just got an email that says, I have lots of people asking for the password. Can you send it to me so I can share it with them? I had Amanda on our staff say that her applicants couldn't get in without a password as well.
Have we looked at whether we posted the information, the link incorrectly?
I haven't.
That's probably not going to solve a problem right now.
And while we're also considering that, Aubrey, if there's a way for you to unshare this slide, I can't figure out how to get it off the screen.
I tried, and that the whole share tab has been cleared out. I don't have that ability anymore.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hey, John, I'm
Yes.
gonna leave the meeting and try to join from the link on the agenda page,
Okay.
just to see what happens. So
Okay. All right. I'll
Keep you
look
posted.
for your name on there. Thanks.
Madam Chair, can we go into a 5-minute break so I could have a side conversation? I'm going to call John and Nick, if that's all right.
Yes, we're on 5-minute break, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. We will
Thank
reconvene at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
At least none of us are cats.
If you are watching this on television, be sure that you can also call in if you would like to call in as well. So, all right, we have the number one is ground lease area at approximately 1269 South Legacy View Street. Case number PLN PCM 2020-00845. And the staff presentation will be by Chrissy Gilmore.
Hello, good evening. So this petition is for conditional use to enlarge the area used for ground equipment that is part of a project to co-locate wireless antennas on an existing monopole at 1269 South Legacy View Street. The subject parcel is zoned M1 light manufacturing and is located in the Inland Port Overlay Zone, which requires Planning Commission approval for conditional uses. Staff is recommending approval of this request. The size of the ground lease area is approximately 12 feet by 24 feet. The zoning ordinance encourages and permits co-location of equipment, but requires conditional use review if the new ground lease equipment does not fit into the existing fenced area. This is why the proposal is going for conditional use approval. So you can see on this bottom image that this is the overall site. So here's Legacy View on the left, and then the ground lease area is highlighted in yellow. And then this above image is a zoomed in image of that ground lease area. And the yellow is the expanded 12 by 24 area. So the proposed ground lease equipment is smaller than the existing ground equipment and shorter than the 6-foot limit established by the ordinance. The additional ground lease area will be fenced using the same materials as the existing fence. So the larger parcel upon which the equipment is situated is 3.9 acres in size. So the proposed increased ground lease area is minimal when compared to the parcel size and should not have more of an impact or detrimental effects than the current leased area. And so as far as public process goes, recognized organizations received early engagement notice, as well as property owners, and the Glendale Community Council requested a presentation at their January meeting. The applicant was there as well as myself, and the Community Council really just had general questions that did not indicate a position on the request, and I did not receive a formal letter of a position from the council. So staff, the proposal generally meets all the applicable standards as discussed in the staff report, and staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use. So this concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions that the commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to ask Chrissy a question before we move on to the applicant? Does the applicant, is Jared White, is he here to present?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, thank you.
I think Chrissy's presentation was pretty well covers it. When Verizon built the tower, they only leased enough space for the tower and their ground equipment. That was, I think, at the request of the property owner. That allows the property owner to negotiate directly with any co-locators. So Verizon leased less space than you typically would for a co-locatable tower. We just engaged the landlord and have entered into a lease agreement with him, basically just expanding the compound as it is. As Chrissy said, it's a really industrial area. We haven't seen any opposition, and it should have no effect on the parcel. So if you don't have questions for me, I don't really have anything else beyond that.
Thank you very much. Do the commissioners have any questions for staff or the applicant before we move on to a public hearing? If not, I will open the public hearing. And are there any people who wish to speak? If you wish to speak, push the little button on the lower left-hand side of your lower right-hand side of your screen. It has a little hand in it.
Just scanning through. I do not see anybody wishing to speak at this time.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no takers on the public hearing, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for a motion or discussion.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if there's no discussion, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Amy.
Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve conditional use PLN PCM 2020-00845.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. I have a motion by Amy and a second by John. Maureen,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Adrian,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
John,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Andres,
I'll vote yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Crystal.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. So we'll thank you. Congratulations. We'll be moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Which is the fence height special exception at approximately 134 East Edgecombe Drive. It's case number PLN PCM 2020-00926. And the staff member is Amanda Roman.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
It's okay.
Very muted. All right, thank you.
Hey, Amanda, I don't know what everyone else can see, but I can only see a tiny screen. Is there any way to
Oh,
make
yes.
that larger? Or
That better?
Oh, yes, that's great.
thank you.
Thank
Perfect. Yeah, of course. All right, I am presenting a special exception request at 134 East Edgecombe Drive. For the request is to add a 4-foot privacy screen to the existing 6-foot transparent fence located within the front and side yard area. The aerial image to the left is of the subject property. The red lines are where the existing fence is located. A special exception permitting the fence was approved in 2018 via special exception application. The photos on the left are of the existing transparent wrought iron fence, and then the photos on the right are the proposed screening. The applicant's proposing to add imitation ivy and or black mesh to the bottom portion of the fence. The current fence was approved with this special exception, so code allows 4-foot fences in the front yard and up to 6 feet in the rear and side yard. And so this exception for the 6-foot fence was approved because it's transparent and at least 80% transparent, and it does not impact the overall character of the neighborhood or the streetscape. If this fencing material is approved, the transparency would reduce to approximately 33%. And it should be noted just up front that the proposed material is not permitted as a residential fencing material. So if the Planning Commission approves the application, the applicant will need to meet code and propose a different material. As we're reviewing this application, the first section was a regulation of fences, walls, and hedges. So additional height can be granted if it's found that the extra height is necessary for the security of the property. And then special exceptions authorized states that the extra height can be granted if it's determined that there will be no negative impact upon the established character of the affected neighborhood and streetscape, maintenance of public and private views, and matters of public safety. And the applicant's narrative stated that the 4-foot screening is essential for the security of the property and neighborhood, and that since the property is privately owned, there is no obligation to provide access to views. So the underlying history of this property is it's undeveloped, which I'll go into in just a moment, but it's an undeveloped vacant property with a view of downtown Salt Lake City. And so residents come, they gathered on the property, public sidewalk, and the applicants stating that the additional fence height for the fence is required to secure the property. So the property has been vacant since it was subdivided in 1954. The current fence was approved to help with the trespassing, which staff agrees with, and there's police documentation showing those numbers. And then the fence was also approved to help with the nuisance taking place on the private property. The applicant's claiming that the installation of this privacy screen is imperative to neighborhood safety. Since this screening was approved in 2018 and installed in 2019, the neighborhood has also asked the Salt Lake Police Department for an increase in police presence. Between 2019 and 2020, there were 43 calls to the SLCPD. 6 of those calls were for a reason other than a patrol check or a traffic stop. So when I was researching the property, I reached out to the Salt Lake City Police Department and asked for a little definition of what each call type in the call log meant. And so for a patrol check, it can be initiated by a resident, or if the officer on duty decides to go and check out a property for whatever reason, they can log it under that definition. And then a traffic stop is if someone's pulled over or anything to do with traffic near the property. So those and the applicant submitted a full call log with their materials. Another reason applicants requesting this special exception is due to parking. So parking is not permitted at any time in front of the property, and then it's also not permitted on Edgecombe Drive between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. If the 4-foot privacy screen was installed, the view of downtown Salt Lake would be blocked from within a low-profile car. And the photo on the bottom left is from passenger seat of my car. And then the red lines, when they installed that privacy screening that has since removed, they put a little wire across to install it, and so that's where I put the red line, so you can see where it hit. And then it should be noted that while they want to block the views of downtown Salt Lake, the street is public, although parking is prohibited in some areas, and then during certain hours it's still a public street, and the public sidewalk as well. So you can see from the photos on the bottom, the view would not be blocked from the public sidewalk. And then I also took a picture standing next to the fence that's along the front property line. So the applicant or the proposal does not comply with 6 of the 8 standards, the specific standards for additional fence height. The proposed screening would make the existing 6-foot fence less than 80% open and spatial. The screen would create a walled-in effect in the front yard of the property, which is not compatible with the character of the neighborhood or urban design of residential zoning districts. The neighborhood consists of open front yards, as you can see from the photos of Edgecombe Drive on the left, and then other streets nearby on the right. It consists of open front yards. On Edgecombe Drive, they're only 15%, so 3 of the properties have a fence located in the front yard. 2 of those are solid wood, and then one's a low wrought iron fence. The proposal does not include ornamental features or architectural embellishments, and the proposed screening is not permitted residential fencing material. The land uses surrounding the property are single family with a natural open space at the rear, and they do not require special height exceptions. And then finally, under this section of standards, staff has not determined that the screening would enhance the security of the neighborhood any more than the existing 6-foot tall transparent fence already does. And then under general standards, the proposal does not comply with 4 of the 7 standards. The screening is not compatible with the R1 7000 residential zoning district purpose, which is to promote compatible development patterns and then preserve the existing character of the neighborhood. And staff believes the screening would have a negative impact on that character and streetscape. It would reduce public views, and then it could also increase crime because the property would be walled off, and regardless of the screening, people could still jump or vandalize the fence to gain access if they decided to do so. Other considerations while reviewing this were the Capitol Hill master plan. The master plan specifically for this neighborhood emphasizes the importance of protecting view corridors and maintain the character of the neighborhood. And then also, while not a standard of approval, I reviewed the crime prevention through environmental design principles, which are just considered best practice. They're a multidisciplinary approach of crime prevention that uses urban and architectural design and the management of the built and natural environments to protect properties. So the three bullet points below, territorial reinforcement and natural access control. Fencing is a prime example of territorial reinforcement, which is the distinction between public and private property. The 6-foot fence that currently exists and signage on the property that says it's no trespassing, also no parking. It clearly indicates that the property is private and that visitors are unwelcome. Shorter fences and landscaping can accomplish the same goal by defining space and establishing a sense of ownership. Staff had suggested adding landscaping around the front and side property lines to create a second barrier and potentially discourage people from climbing the fence or vandalizing it to gain access. And the applicant stated that there's no water service on the property, and installing it prior to the construction of a home would be too costly. And then natural surveillance. Jane Jacobs coined the term eyes on the street, which is a theory that public spaces are safer when there are more people in the area, thus more eyes on the street to notice if something is amiss or unsafe in their neighborhood. So natural surveillance techniques include keeping areas well lit, as well as eliminating hiding spots by removing tall hedges or fences. And so the existing 6-foot tall transparent fence is a physical barrier, which discourages people from entering the property. The applicant's request to add the 4-foot screening could deter people from stopping to look at the view of the city if they were to park illegally in front of the parking or in front of the property, which they do. They definitely do. But it would also inhibit neighbors from seeing anything going on behind that fencing. It could potentially create a more unsafe environment. And then finally, maintenance. I included some photos of the property from Google Earth. You can see people gathering on it for some sort of protest or photos in 2015, but the other 2 photos are examples of the maintenance of the property throughout the year. So well-maintained properties signal to passerby that someone cares about the property, they care about what happens in the space, and they're maintaining and attending to it. So the lack of maintenance can contribute to vandalism, which may escalate into more serious crimes over time. The applicant has provided a lot of evidence of litter outside of the property, and then in one case, vandalism to the fence that was installed in 2019. And so that's not being disputed, and we recognize that's a nuisance, and then of course that criminal activity has taken place on and near the property. But in addition to reviewing the police reports and the applicant's proposal, staff reviewed the property history, including the number of civil enforcement cases, building permits, and planning petitions. Since 2012, there have been 26 cases initiated by civil enforcement for violations. Some of them were for graffiti, so that's not something that the applicant or the property owner would have caused, but the majority, up to 20, were for overgrown weeds, as shown in the photo. And then one of the cases was also for installing that privacy screen without a permit. And finally, staff agrees with the applicant that the undeveloped property has attracted people who wish to see the view of downtown Salt Lake City. And some of those people have contributed to nuisance activities as well as plain criminal activities. Staff believes that the existing 6-foot transparent fence has served its purpose to keep the public off the property without detracting from the neighborhood character or the streetscape. And the proposed 4-foot privacy screening would not prohibit people from standing on the public sidewalk to see the view of downtown. It would, however, block the view from a low-profile car, which would address one of the applicant's concerns about people parking in front of the property. That being said, they could still legally park other places and see the view. The proposed 4-foot screening does not meet this special exception as standards of approval, and staff is recommending denial. If the Planning Commission does approve the request, they will need to change the materials, which would be appropriate to approve at a staff level. The materials would have to be durable and meet city code. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here to present?
Yes, ma'am. John Rogers. I am the attorney for the property owners at the Pantry Crossing Trust.
Okay, can you hold just a second? Are there any questions for Amanda before we hear from the applicant? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you very much. You may have heard the saying before by Robert Frost from his poem Mending Wall, "Good fences make good neighbors." I'm going to submit that this is a slight twist on that saying, because here the good fence that we're looking for, which was up for a while, but I guess was non-compliant, the privacy screening, as was briefly mentioned by Ms. Roman. The neighbors want it. The neighbors are the ones who worked with my client being absent from the property until it's developed, who said, hey, we're having problems here. What can we do? And it was the neighborhood association that agreed to give special permission for this type of fence to make the application to the city. And it was the neighbors who pitched in together with my client to pay the costs of the fence. What we're looking to do, this doesn't benefit my client as much as it benefits all the neighbors in the area. This is a closed-end street. It's on the side of the street that faces the valley with a look. It's between, if you looked at the materials, it's between two pieces of real property that are enhanced, that have homes on them. The fence runs as close as we could put it to the neighbors' property lines to try and reduce people going around or over it. The height of the fence was specifically because people were getting onto the property, and this would reduce it. There's a gate that allows access to try and keep the property up. To the extent there was any concern with that in the past, neighbors have tried to, who have access to the property, have tried to keep the property cleaned of, they found all kinds of litter, including broken bottles, syringes, vandalizing has occurred on the no trespassing signs. The fence, the gate is there to get in and mow it. We've been trying to make sure that it's a more presentable place. The privacy screen, the 4-foot, was up when the fence was constructed for a while until my clients were ordered to take it down, and the neighbors helped with taking it down so that, we were obeying the law. What we're looking at here is for the benefit of the community, not just my client. Thomas Jefferson said, "The purpose of government is to enable the people of a nation to live in safety and happiness. Government exists for the interest of the governed, not for the governors." And we recognize that when exceptions swallow up the rule, that's a bad thing. But we think here, and there are, as I understand it, plenty of the neighbors who are willing to be heard here, that when that 4-foot privacy screen was up, the problems with the parking in front and with some of the other trespassing and vandalism that occurred with that dropped during that time period. And it's since gone up again since it was forced to be removed. To the extent that Ms. Roman mentioned that it's blocking the view, well, it's really not. She admitted that when you're standing on the sidewalk. So if people aren't parking right in front of it and they really want to take a look, they still can. But having the privacy screen was effectively reducing people from parking and running cars in front of it, from littering, from creating a nuisance when they're not supposed to be there. They come, it's an attractive nuisance because it brings people at all hours of the night, even when they're not supposed to be there at all on the street. And so what we're trying to do here is promote the best interests of those who actually live there, to protect them, to not have to have them call the police all the time. It's going to reduce the problems that the police officers have to face there. It's going to help prevent littering and vandalism, the trespassing. It's going to make the neighbors happy. It's going to make the police happy, and happy neighbors make for the property owner, my client, to be happy. And so we're not asking for something like with an established house that he has a benefit or this owner has a benefit that somebody else doesn't. This is for a purpose, and we know it worked because it was up for a while. And all we're asking is for this honorable commission to permit what we did have up before to be put back up. Now, as far as the material goes, we'll certainly, if this honorable body is willing to allow this to occur, we'll make sure that we have compliant materials that are up. It's not blocking the entire view, 4 feet, but it makes a difference in this particular case. And claiming that it's going to create places to hide and create actually more damage to the neighbors and to the property, that's just not true. You can see over it when standing there. The neighbors can see, so nobody's going to be able to hide behind it. You can still see who's there, So I would just ask that even though the staff has recommended it against it in this case, that in this case, an exception should be granted for very good reasons. We know it works because it did work. We took it down when we were ordered to do so, but we'd ask for permission to put it back up. It does benefit the community here. If they want to take a look out at some other place, or they want to see it by standing on the curb, nobody's particularly harmed in granting this request. And it is unusual because it's not for the benefit of the property owner as much as it is the adjacent neighborhood. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them, but that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Are there any questions for the applicant or for Amanda before we move to public hearing?
I have 2 quick questions.
Yes.
For the applicant, when was the 4-foot privacy fence, temporary fence up? Like, what roughly were the dates?
I don't have that right in front of me. Whenever the fence went up was Right after that was when the privacy screen went up. It's been within, I think it was fall when we were instructed to take down the privacy fence.
So it was up for roughly like 9 months or so. Okay. And then, or 6 months. And then my second question for staff, the patrol checks, that's when the police is called, and then then it kind of comes to drive-by, or is that just if they're in the neighborhood and they're checking the box?
Either one. Either one. So that's if you call them asking for them to drive by the property or look at the property, or if they're in the neighborhood and they decide to make a stop. And the neighborhood did ask for an increase in police presence. So if you look at the call log, there's 0 patrol checks until 2019. And then it increased to, I'd have to look at it right now. Too hard with my sharing of the screen, but I believe about 35 within 2019. So the patrol checks went up substantially because they knew the property was attracting people, but the actual number of not necessarily even citations or anything like that, but calls due to a nuisance like the vandalism or public indecency dropped once that fence was installed.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question for the applicant and one for staff. For the applicant, what is the intent of the usage of the property for the property owners? Do they have anything in plan in the near future to build something or to use it for something, or what's the intended purpose, if any?
I think the plan is not in the near future, but at some point to construct a home at that location. Because it's on the edge of the mountain, it may require some remediation, compacting it, pressing the stuff out, making adequate land for a home. And that's the intent at some point, to put in a single family residence there in compliance with the community. But I can say that it's my understanding that wouldn't be for at least several years.
Okay, I see. Thank you. And for staff, when did we find out about I guess there's 2 fences, one that was placed before and taken out. How did the city find out about this first fence that was removed, I guess?
So yeah, the current fence that's there now, that transparent steel fence, that was approved in 2018. I'm not sure when that screening, fake ivy screening was added, but in the fall of 2018, civil enforcement received a call about it, a complaint, and so then they asked the applicant to remove it.
Oh, I see. I assume it's one of the neighbors, perhaps, that was.
Yeah, I'm not sure who specifically called, but they did issue a violation for not receiving it.
Was the fence up for all of 2020 with no privacy screening?
My understanding is that it was not. Part of 2020, my understanding was the privacy screen was up. Am I incorrect?
The fence is built and finished in March of 2019. And you said the privacy screen is up to the fall. Was it the fall of 2019 or the fall of 2020 when the privacy screen finally came down?
I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it was during 2020 that it actually came down at the instruction of
in the fall or the spring?
I'm not 100% sure. My recollection is it was brought to my attention roughly in the fall.
The privacy screen came down in the fall. I'm not sure when it was
of 2020.
Of 2020, yes, correct. Of 2020, but the Google Earth photo I have of the property and the existing fence is from the summer of 2019. I can, if I hustle, try to get.
I'm asking this because if you look at the chart in the staff report of the call summaries by type, I mean, you have an increasing number by year. It goes 19, 20, 26, and 36 calls in 2019, and then 2020 has 10. And so if the privacy screen is up in all of 2020, then that means, you could make an argument that there was an impact there. If it was down for all of 2020, then you would say that the privacy screen had no impact because you had the most calls ever in 2019.
Commissioner,
That's why I'm trying to get this time frame right, because it matters whether or not this is going to solve the problem.
If I can just interrupt for a second, I believe that there are some of the, I know that there are some people waiting to speak who can answer this question definitively.
Okay, thanks.
That being said, I'm going to open the public hearing. If you would like to speak, please tap on the little hand down in the bottom of your screen. There's a tiny little box with a tiny little hand in it. If you tap on that, then we will know that you would like to speak. And after you finish speaking, if you tap it again so that we will not call on you again. So, John, can we speak? Can we begin?
Yes, and again, if anybody's having trouble, if you for some reason can't find the little hand or you're having issues, you can send us an email at planning.comments@slcgov.com. You could send us an email that just says your name and we'd be happy to call on you. You don't have to write out all your message. If you want to have your message just read aloud, we'd be happy to do that too. So we do have several, members of the public who'd like to speak, so you do have some time to prepare for that. The first speaker that I have is James Schulte. James, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can. James, you'll have 2 minutes to share anything
Thanks.
you'd like to share with the commission.
Yeah, could I actually request maybe a switching of orders? Megan Colston was a significant part of the authoring of the application in support of the property owner, and I also provided support, but we had sort of organized our comments so she could give you the overview, and then I'll follow on that. Is that possible?
Sure. You want to start with Megan Colston, is that correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. Megan, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. So
Okay,
you will
thank you.
go for it. You have 2 minutes to speak on anything you'd like to. So thank you.
Well, first I'd like to thank Amanda, the planner, for working with us and putting together this very thorough review. And I'd also like to thank the Planning Commission for being open to hear our proposal and listening to our feedback. My husband and I live directly below the Edgecombe property in the Columbus Court Homeowners Association, which I've been president and on the board in for multiple years. So I'm authorized to speak on behalf of our entire neighborhood association. We've lived in our home approximately 6 years and have experienced things I wouldn't wish upon any neighborhood or any of you. We've had violent crimes such as gunshots. We've had international tour buses stop at our property. We've had drug paraphernalia, and I can't even count the sleepless nights we've had in fear. We appreciate the thorough review of the application. However, we respectively disagree with the report's conclusions. First and foremost, the property is absolutely a public nuisance and continues to be so even after the installation of the 6-foot fence. What I can tell you is that the visitors to the property have not decreased since the erection of the 6-foot fence. While it's prevented people from trespassing on the property, there's still hundreds of people that frequent the property and now congregate and party on the sidewalk and street. In our proposal, Detective Alan Givick have even said, quote, it's been one of his top complaints in his district. Secondly, the report references the number of police calls, but I want to be very clear and let you know that the neighborhood has essentially stopped calling the police and parking enforcement out of frustration. It can take the police up to an hour from the point of call to actually visiting the property. It's a huge problem, especially when attention is needed immediately. And additionally, parking enforcement hours are closed when we need the help the most, which are the late evening hours and all through the night. So while the report references tell you one story, every neighbor, including those joining us today, can paint a very different picture. This is a single family zoned lot and it's being used as commercial public property. Our neighborhood has come up with a solution and we're presenting it to you. And I'd like to respectfully remind the commission that we had 49 neighbors donate money to install this 6-foot fence. Think
Megan,
about that for a second.
Ms. Colston,
49 homes.
excuse me, Ms. Colston, your time is up.
Thank you.
All right, we will move back to James Schulte at the top of the list here. James, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks so much. So I think as I listened to the comments from the staff and some of the questions, what I'm hearing is that we're applying developed lot standards and thought processes to an undeveloped lot. So as Megan said, this is a vacant lot in a single family zoned neighborhood that's been co-opted by the community as a public amenity and a park space effectively. This, while just 1/10 of a mile away, there's a beautiful city park with wonderful views for people to see. And the reason they don't go there is because they have to get out of their car. They could get out of their car, go to the public park that has proper trash facilities, proper parking, and use it as it was intended. But we're now getting a single family lot, and the reason they're using it is because they can sit in their car, pure and simple. So I'd like you to view this in its interim state. And in fact, in the proposed change that you are looking at in the fence ordinance, I know that you've talked specifically about vacant lots and looked at the unique circumstances there. Unfortunately, the proposal from the Planning Commission doesn't go far enough to allow us to put this kind of screen in place. But rest assured, this is just a part of the solution. It's not the silver bullet. We do trash campaign pickups on a regular basis. We've discouraged news media from broadcasting on the site. We call parking enforcement. We coordinate with community policing. We've had temporary video surveillance by police. We've done feasibility studies on landscaping, lighting, and video. We've looked at other fence proposals. I mean, this has gone on and on and on for years. So what I want you to understand when you listen to what will be a litany of other comments there'll be some energy on these comments because we've been working hard and we've been working together and we've been trying to find a solution that's a nice compromise because some wanted a full 6-foot screen, but then others said, you know what? How about if we allow for a screen that still lets people take a look at the view, get out of their car, take a look, and then move on? Because the problem is those that ignore all the no parking signs, ignore all the enforcement, and sit there all night. So I'd ask that you consider the broader picture of what's going on. We have a land use conflict here in an interim use situation. So you're not proposing something that can be used across the whole city. We're proposing something, and you're considering a proposal for a very specific circumstance. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jim. Those who are speaking, please, I'm going to remind you that you have 2 minutes. When you hear the little bell go off, that's an indication that your time is up. So, and we're doing that because we have a lot of people who want to speak. John? Have we lost John? Have we lost our host? Aubrey?
I don't know if John's having technical issues. He's still showing as the host.
Is there anyone else who can host while he's having technical issues?
Let me see if I can try to claim the host duties. Just a second. Take a moment, but I otherwise cannot unmute anybody. Give me just 1 second, please.
Okay. I apologize to everyone who is trying to phone in here and trying to talk here. We don't usually have this much difficulty. It looks like Jonathan Mann has been unmuted. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you go ahead and you have 2 minutes?
Thank you. I am the property owner of the vacant lot at 134 Edgecombe. I appreciate you taking this time and giving us the opportunity to ask for an exception. The situation has been deteriorating over many, many years in this area. And what was earlier merely a nuisance or a frustration has turned into frequent property damage and extremely aggressive behavior. The neighbors have worked very hard to maintain the issues, but the vandalism is extremely aggressive. And we're trying to deal with behavior that I wouldn't have thought possible in our society 10 years ago. And I understand the reasoning behind the exceptions, and they're well reasoned, but the vandals are not working on reason, and the vandalism is very unreasonable. And I'm concerned that the logic or the orderliness of the restriction may not suffice to protect the neighborhood in this situation. I do not want to take too much time. I would prefer any time I have left over be given to those in the neighborhood who have direct access to the situation. But I thank the commission. I thank Amanda for her time. And I would prefer to hear from the people who deal with this day to day. Mr. Lyons, a couple of quick points. The fence was requested to be brought down in June of 2020. The meshing was. And also, as to my intent on moving in, I submitted architectural designs and they were approved many years ago, but there was a death in the family shortly after that. The economy turned down and the builder went bankrupt. And you can imagine how the story continues all the way to coronavirus. But I look forward to the time when I can live there. And I hope it will not be several years from now. But it has been a difficult situation to get there. But I have the plans submitted and approvals from several years ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So I do have host control. So I don't know who has already spoken. So I'm going to just start at the.
Why don't you unmute Doug Fidel? Douglas Fidel would be the next one.
Okay. Doug, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I appreciate your taking the time to consider this matter. I live directly across the street with my 6 children. My 3 youngest children are under 10 years old, and my greatest concern is their safety. And with the vast number of people that come to the view lot and conduct illegal illegal activities, I'm very concerned about what my children may see and that my children may be harmed. And I don't allow my children to play in the front yard because of the danger. When we put up the screen for a period of time, it was only put up on a portion of the property. It was not put across the entire property. And what I observed firsthand was that instead of the cars parking where the screen was, they purposely avoided the screen, and we cut down on the number of people that came by significantly. And so I feel that if the screen was put up, that it might be enough of a deterrent that we can change the habits and behaviors so that it's no longer a fun place to hang out. What I have observed is that the no parking restriction did not stop people from parking. What it did is they keep their car running, believing that as long as the car is running, they are not in violation of the parking ordinance. And what the car serves for them is a convenient place to hold their beer and a loud source of music so that throughout the night they can entertain themselves. And we stopped calling the police because the police were not coming. And when they would come, by the time they got there, one round of people misbehaving was replaced with another round of people misbehaving. So I don't think that the police records reflect much. If you wanted me to call the police with every violation, I would have probably 10 calls per night. And as soon as the police cleared people out, 5 minutes later, it would be full again. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
The next hand that I still see up in alphabetical order is Charles Cowley.
Yes.
Charles?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
In your earlier part of this meeting, you indicated that at least one of you had gone by the site that you were considering for the access of a duplex. I'm wondering if any of you have come up in the late afternoon or evening hours and looked at this situation. If you had, you would find out that you cannot go more than 5 minutes without somebody violating the no parking signs that are in front of that lot, and that at least half of them are playing their radio or their stereo or whatever so loud you can hear them inside my house that is 3 houses away. And the litter that they throw out there, they shatter beer bottles and whiskey bottles. They dump cans on the sidewalk and the curb and throw them over the fence and into the lot. And they just completely ignore the no parking situation. And it would be nice if we could get some enforcement of that, but the police are restricted as to how many people they've got. And they can't come up here and sit on our one lot and protect any of the rest of the city. And the only thing that we're trying to do here is to curtail the activity that's going on in there. And when you do, there's still some people in large trucks that can see over the top of it from the street, but by and large, you cut way down on the amount of people that are parking there illegally at all hours of the day. And it is all hours. It's not just in the nighttime. You can't go 30 minutes without seeing a car there parked illegally. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a reminder to people, when you're done speaking, if you click on that hand icon again, it'll go down, and that way we can make sure everybody who wants to speak or has spoken can.
It's not doing that.
Okay, thank you.
I muted myself.
Mr. Hucken would be next.
Okay.
Mr.
Hucken, you are unmuted.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tom.
Finally. Okay. My wife and I live 2 houses away from this lot and have done so for 32 years. So we've seen it go into various stages of degradation. The previous speakers have made it clear how terrible the situation is. Nights, especially summer nights and good weather and so on, you get all this trash, you got noise, you have lights, you have fireworks. It's just a mess. So I want to make a few quick points since I only have 2 minutes here. Number one, the 6-foot fence has been a success. Adding the screen would make it even more of a success. It demonstrated itself previously. Despite the no parking ordinance and 3 signs, which are often vandalized, people routinely park there, especially on weekends and summer nights. A screen inhibits that somewhat, to some degree, because it prevents people from just sitting in their cars and hanging out. That includes winter idling, by the way. I walk past there in the winter and I see people sitting there in their cars idling, adding a lot of filthy exhaust to our filthy winter air. And with a screen there, they wouldn't be able to do that because they come there for the view. And the screen forces them to get out of their car, stand on the sidewalk, then they can look at the beautiful view of the city.
And they might still be idling.
So I want to make that point, which hasn't been made. The screen is strongly supported by residents in the neighborhood and by the detective in charge of the neighborhood. There was a survey done earlier that found 87% of the neighbors were in favor of this. And then finally, I will say that the staff report repeatedly talks about the screen being characteristic of the neighborhood. Noise and litter are what is uncharacteristic of the neighborhood, and the screen is an attempt to do something about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
So,
Rhonda Devereaux is the next one, Nick.
okay.
I'm just helping you out.
I know, it makes it difficult when it's not in order, alphabetical order, we're jumping all around the screen.
Okay.
Rhonda, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Rhonda Devereaux. I'm at 88 Edgecombe Drive. I feel fortunate that I'm not right next to the empty lot, which is quite the nuisance. You know, I've lived in this neighborhood for almost 20 years. When we first moved here, Fox News used to film the news nightly, sometimes in the morning, from this empty lot. And we got to know the people who were there. So we weren't trying to push them out. We were happy to see them use the lot. There was a few taxi drivers that you would always see bringing their fares out to the empty lot to show people our beautiful city. And we were always happy to have them too. It's not that as a neighborhood, we don't want people to enjoy the view. The problem is that the people who are going to the lot have changed over the years. These are not respectful people that come to enjoy the view and then leave. They come to party, they come to do drugs. They come because they don't want to be in a place where they're going to be harassed. I can't walk my dog down the sidewalk when there are groups of people gathered around this empty lot because I'm afraid of what could become of me and or my dog when I pass through them, because they're not like a friendly crowd that you would want to just jump in or walk by in the evening without fear that something might happen to you. I should not have to be afraid to walk down the sidewalk in my own neighborhood. That is unacceptable. The 4-foot privacy fabric, or there's also metal options that we had initially looked at, is not a permanent, actually the whole fence is not a permanent feature for that lot. It's temporary, for heaven's sakes. It's temporary to keep us safe and to try and reduce the traffic and the nuisance and the garbage and the drugs and everything else that we're forced to put up with. And even if we call for city services, we're just getting relief. Thank you.
Thank you.
So who's next on the order of list?
Kathy Tights.
Kathy, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. We live on Dorchester. I pick up my husband every night from work. We come back up, and it's sometimes impossible to get down the street on Edgecombe because there are cars double parked on the street, and it has to become a one-lane street. You have to wait and honk at people to get out of the way, and that doesn't account for just that. It's also the trash and the type of people that are on having family reunion pictures taken with beer bottles and kinds of disruptive things. So we are for the fence and the privacy fence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
The next is Jim and Anna Romano, and please state which one of you is speaking. Unless we can tell.
Okay.
Anna,
hello.
you're unmuted.
Yes, I'm Jim Romano, and we are the fortunate people that live next to the lot at 118 East Edgecombe. And people have expressed really what's going on. We have a little bit more of a unique situation since we are so close. We're actually the people that go out twice a week with the plastic bag to pick up all the garbage. We're the people that have the driveway that's used to turn around. Most people approach from coming up East Capitol turn into our driveway, turn around, and then they can park at the place. So that's been a little bit disconcerting. The real point I'd like to leave you with is, as Ms. Roman pointed out, to the lot next to us, to the west, they have a 4-foot, very nice looking wooden fence. They have their lot, half their lot contains their house. The other half of the lot is wide open to the view. No one stops to park there, all right? And it is 100% effective. And I think that if we were to have that same 4-foot shield in this empty lot, I think it would work significantly to reduce the amount of traffic and remove some of the inconvenience that we experience living there. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Maggie Probst.
Hello, can you hear us?
Maggie, you're on. Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's Maggie and Greg Probst. We've lived in the neighborhood for 13 years. We're on the corner of Dorchester and Dartmoor, past Edgecombe. Every time we leave our neighborhood, we walk our dog. And this has been a really huge nuisance the whole time we've lived there, and it has increased. And I want to say to all the people that have already spoken, I 100% agree with all of my neighbors and what they said. I'm totally in support of this fence. And I'm going to let my husband say what he wants to say.
I would confirm all the comments from the neighbors as well and appreciate them. They're accurate. This has been a huge historic nuisance. There are oftentimes when there's people parked up and down both sides of the road, oftentimes when there are people double parked, people sitting there partying, drinking, playing loud music. I actually don't understand how the neighbors can even tolerate, the closest neighbors can tolerate the level of noise on many occasions. This is a huge, huge problem and has been a problem for years. Maybe that cameras could help too, but this is a very good proposed solution, and it will take the lion's share away of the kind of people that like to just sit in their car, throw the door open, have a beer, and watch the city lights while they have their little party. They can go a block and a half down and go to the city park and have a much better place to do that. So that would be a much better solution.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, I believe Vanya Watkins is next.
Vanya, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you very much. Speaking of history, I have lived here for nearly 56 years, right across the street from this lot. And believe me, things have really changed. As Rhonda mentioned, people used to be very nice, but it's quite worrisome. And I just want to say that I feel that the people are much more important than the ordinances. Please consider our feelings. It isn't just complying with the ordinances, and although we're respectful and we do try to make things work here, but if other people would respect what we have, we would appreciate it a lot more. I see these cars out there all hours of the night, and I don't know what they're doing. Are they planning something? Is there going to be a break-in, or what are they doing out there? It makes me very worried. I don't open my windows in the summer because I hear too much noise, and I just don't know. There's a fear element here, and I think that should be considered as you think about what we're doing here. And I did see that mesh helped a lot, and I agree with my neighbor that where it appeared the cars were fewer, and where it was open, they came. You know, I saw your comment about being walled in. have you noticed we do have some fences up here because people are getting kind of worried about that. Maybe we'll see more fences on our private property because of that. I don't think that's going to cause a walled-in effect at all to have that. In fact, it will definitely improve because we won't see weeds and trash and everything else. I just really want to say, please consider our feelings. This is not a resort area. We don't have to provide activities for people to come up. It's a neighborhood and it's quiet. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Vanya. I believe that is everyone who wishes to speak whose hand is up, unless you have received any emails. You may not have access to those.
Did we hear from, no, I guess we did. Never mind.
Everyone that has their hand up that I see, we have heard from.
Hey, Nick, and sorry, commissioners, my computer froze up, so I left you guys hanging there for a moment. We got an email from Joanna Pincus, but they didn't indicate which item they wanted to speak about, so I wasn't sure if it was this item.
Joanna definitely is on this item.
Okay, so
I got her to figure out how to raise her hand, and I didn't see it come up. So, oh, now it's up. Here we go.
It's up now, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Joanna, you're unmuted. Joanna?
I don't think she can hear us. Joanna, can you hear us? Okay, let's go. I do see one more hand here, Amy Leach, that I did not hear before. So let's go to her next.
Amy, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Amy Leach. I don't live in the neighborhood yet, although that is a plan of mine. I just want to tell you a little bit of an outside perspective. My dad lives about 4 or 5 houses down for the lot. He just recently passed away. He was 100 years old. And so I would go every night to visit him. And the nightmare of me having to navigate that street with my father every single night was about the most maddening thing that I could do during the day. And so I got into the habit of shining my bright lights on all those that were parking there when they shouldn't have been parking. And the violent reactions that I got from people, the finger and threatening actions just from me shining my lights as if this was a property that they owned instead of them violating the law. The other thing is one time I saw a police officer up there, and so I stopped my car and I had a nice conversation with him, and I said, what can be done? And he said, oh, here, let me give you a direct number. So sure enough, the next night I was going by and I called and it went right to a recording and it never went any further than that. The next 3 nights I did the same thing. It went right to a recording. And so when the neighbors say that they call the police and it does absolutely nothing, it is so maddening, and I don't even live there. So I can't even comprehend what these neighbors have put up with for so many years. It is not their property, it's a private property. The people who own the property want to solve the problem. We want to solve the problem. And there's a solution that is so obvious that it just seems ridiculous for us not to implement it, even for another trial to keep some statistics to see if it really does reduce as these neighbors are wanting it to do and as it said that it did before. So it just seems to me beyond common sense that this won't even be implemented, just even for a trial period, so that we can see if it really does make a difference. The other thing is you don't. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Were we able to get Joanna?
Joanna, I've unmuted you. Can you hear us? Joanna? She does not seem to be responsive.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but I am going to go ahead and close the public meeting in the interest of time, and bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion.
So I have a question for staff. You know, I'm very sympathetic to what's going on here, and I appreciate the majority of residents presented I feel like a very realistic view, and so I appreciate their participation. I'm wondering, Amanda, if we have any idea of how many vacant lots we have, because I do very much worry about when we allow something for one particular extraordinary event, because every neighborhood is going to feel like theirs is an extraordinary event as well. And I'm just wondering, like, what is the magnitude of our potential for vacant lot issues? Do you know? Do you have a sense about that?
I don't. I'm sorry. I can't speak to how many vacant residential lots there are. I'm not sure if Nick or John would be able to jump in.
This is John. I was going to say, obviously, this is a really specific question, so I don't have a great answer for you to say that there's 15 and there's 20, but you know, it's not that uncommon. If you even just kind of look at the Google view and you start just in this neighborhood alone and start making down like Sandhurst, which is the furthest west road on the block. A lot of these that are on the furthest west that have the best view often end up being the ones that are the last ones developed, probably because they're the most costly. Or you know, the most in demand. So it's definitely not a singular problem, although I wouldn't be able to tell you how large of a problem would be, if that makes sense.
So for staff, if we were to approve this kind of request, well, we need to go kind of item by item through the criteria in 21A 5260 and explain why we either agree or disagree with the staff's assessment.
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that if we're going to go against the recommendation from staff, that it's important that we make findings on that.
You know, pretty clear articulation as to, so we really have to focus our kind of discussion, what we do next, kind of on those standards.
I have a question for staff as well. One of the speakers alluded to the fact that down the street there was a 4-foot fence in the front yard. 4-foot fences are allowed in the front yard in this area, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
4-foot fences. Sure.
So if the applicant, for example, took down the 6-foot fence, they could easily put up a 4-foot fence that was not transparent or not?
Yes, they could put up a 4-foot fence with the appropriate residential fencing materials such as wood or wrought iron.
But it would not have to be transparent, is that right?
Correct.
Could that fence also be built behind this fence?
I would need to look at that a bit more. I'm not sure on that. Potentially.
That fence can be built at a 4-foot fence can be built at the property line.
So in theory, they could just build a wood fence behind this fence and that would be allowed.
I don't think you'd have 2 fences like that, can you?
One fence. I don't, right?
There's nothing that says you can only have one fence. So you could, if you wanted to divide a yard up with multiple fences, as long as they meet the height code, you can do that.
So indeed, if this were approved, then we would have to, and they would have to switch materials, which means they could not put the fake ivy or any other kind of sort of material that was easily was not stable on this. They would have to build something like a wooden fence on top of the other wooden, on top of the wrought iron fence.
Correct.
I
Right.
think my concern with the ivy fence is that's pretty easily vandalized and removed by someone who doesn't want it there. A wood fence would be much more difficult to be removed. Just an
Well,
observation.
especially if it was built on the inside of the other fence.
Yeah, you'd have to jump the fence to then tear down the fence. So
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if this is, you know, if it's a temporary fence, whether the applicant would be willing to build. I mean, it's actually going to be pretty expensive to do a fence that will meet city code for this project. A 4-foot fence, a 4-foot application to the existing fence or an additional fence or whatever.
I mean,
Chair, can I make a comment?
Sure.
I think if the planning commission is going down the path of trying to find another avenue to build a second fence or do something like along those lines, I think we'd be better off with our time helping you make appropriate findings just to approve screening on the existing fence.
Well,
It doesn't necessarily
no.
That doesn't necessarily seem like I mean, I don't say this very often, but that seems to be going down a path of ridiculousness. So, and I don't mean to offend anybody by that, but I mean, what would be the point?
I guess my question, Nick, is that just the first couple of comments, or is this body really walking down that path? Because to me, it feels like I can see the neighbors are upset. I believe them that they're upset and they want the city to do something about this. I think this is, if they're upset at their neighbor who hasn't built on the property. And they've been talking about this for years. They're saying it's been getting worse for years. He should build on his property. I know we can't make him do that. That's not what I'm implying, but they're mad at the wrong people. And I hope as a body, we're not going to get sucked into this fight, because I think it's inappropriate for us to be trying to solve their problem. This is, I think it's not our problem to solve, but that's my opinion. If I'm alone, you guys can tell me I'm up in the night.
I'm with you, Sarah. To me, this isn't a land use issue. This is a nuisance issue that they're trying to come up with a land use solution to solve. And I can't see how we get there under how the code is drafted. I don't feel compelled to make an exception. We don't have that authority. I don't see where I mean, it's pretty clear that it can't be that opaque in the standard. So I'm struggling to see where the code gives us the authority to approve the screening.
well, so, I mean, there's two sections here. There's the first section where this special exception is authorized. And maybe staff can clarify, I mean, they don't need to meet all of those criteria. They only need to meet some of those. And then they need to meet all the criteria in the general standards. Is that correct? Like for the special exceptions, you have to meet one or two of these other, like for when it could be authorized. Am I reading that correctly, or do they have to meet all of those, both sections?
The general standards.
Yeah, so there's 21A 5230, special exception authorized. And in there's A through H. That kind of outline like when, and certainly there are some that they do meet and some that they do not, but some that are relevant, some that are not. But they don't need to meet all A through H. They just need to meet one or two of these, and then we take one of these, and then we go and we apply the standards in 21A 5260, and they have to meet all of those standards to get the special exception. Is that correct?
Right, so the general standards speak to the appropriateness due to the location of the proposal, and then it's broken down into that you need to meet ABC for the specific.
Through G in that section.
Yeah, so this one goes through G, and then the specific standards for additional height go through the H, so.
Can I make an additional comment on that? If you read the authorization languages under additional height for fences, and I'll just read this out loud so it's in the record. What it says is that additional height for fences, walls, or similar structures may be granted to exceed the height limits established for fences and walls in Chapter 21A40. That's where fence height's regulated. Of this title, if it is determined that there will be no negative impacts upon the established character of the affected neighborhood and streetscape, maintenance of public and private views, and matters of public safety. So the rest of that, you're right, A through H are not standards. That's just when you can apply for it. But those three things have to be found in addition to the general standards of a special exception. So no negative impacts on the character of the neighborhood or streetscape, maintenance of public and private views, and matters of public safety. So that's, in this situation, you know, it seems like there's some discussion about perhaps those two of those things may conflict with each other based on the evidence and testimony you've heard.
We're really not talking about height. We're talking about transparency. And materials as well.
Well, but Commissioner Scheer, we are talking about height because there's a 6-foot fence in the front yard, and what they're now asking for is to amend that original approval. So we're still talking about that original over height 6-foot fence. We're not talking about a new 4-foot fence at this time.
I understand that, but that fence has already been approved, the 6-foot fence.
It's approved as a clear, transparent fence. So
That's why I'm saying, yeah, so that's why I'm saying we're talking about we already approved the height. What we're talking about is whether or not to approve the transparency and the materials.
Essentially, you have to look at it as a new approval because it's a different, if they add something to the fence that changes that fence, it's different than their original approval. And what the special exception chapter says is that if you're modifying an approved special exception, it's to be considered a new special exception.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm generally trying to work with them to find a way to make it happen. I mean, in my sense, like if this was a 4-foot fence and they came to us and said they want to increase it to 6 feet because of security problems and people climbing on the property, I'd be probably more inclined to do it. I wouldn't be inclined to do a 6-foot fence necessarily, but because I think if you were to look at, if they had a 4-foot and they would said that we want to go to 6 feet because of the public safety and trespass and other issues, I'd probably be inclined to kind of maybe consider that. And I don't think there's a lot of adverse impacts that really, if any, that happen. If anything, there's a benefit to most of the people that are there, including the trash cleanup and even the expense on the police kind of coming by from a public standpoint. The police constantly coming by that property. It seems like a lot of calls on one property.
I'm also inclined to support an approval, and I think the guidance that allows us to do that is in the exception itself, where it's been pretty clear that the affected neighborhood and streetscape wants this. It's not blocking the view unless you're sitting in your car, and it improves public safety. And so I think we have the guidance right there in the exception language, personally, my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. It seems that we have, those two things that have been addressed by the neighbors quite well, in my view. And, to take it into consideration would be one of the things that we should do as a commission.
Yeah.
The other one I'm struggling with, I'm trying to work through, is this compatible with surrounding development and the fact that you don't have any 6-foot fences in front yards really anywhere else. That's the one that I'm.
Well, I think the point I was trying to make earlier was not that there's a way to do it, but I'm worried about the durability of the material. One windstorm could take that down and then you're back where you started. And there's a maintenance issue on the property to begin with. I'm concerned that the owner of the property, who's responsible, I feel, for a lot of these issues, isn't going to maintain that screening element. And so that's why I brought up the idea of the wood that would make a more durable, longer lasting screening element. But at the end of the day, it should come down to when is there a time limit on this, and when are they actually going to develop the lot? You know, is this a permanent solution or is this a temporary one?
Can we temporarily approve? Can you temporarily approve special exceptions or have them sunset?
I'm not sure.
No, a special exception runs with the land, so it's approved until essentially they voluntarily remove it.
But we also can't demand that the property be developed.
Right.
You can.
Yeah.
This continues to be his problem until he develops it. I mean, I don't think it's our job to take off that pressure that he's obviously feeling. You know, it feels to me with this, what I'm hearing from the neighbors is a lot of triggering language. It feels, you know, when they're talking about the way they use the police, it feels like weaponizing the police. I don't understand. I'm not hearing about real crimes other than a little bit of loitering and a little bit, and some, you know, they're throwing trash. Well, that happens in all our neighborhoods. Why are we so worried about this particular neighborhood?
I think that's a fair point, but I think that this is a spot without options beyond this solution that at some point people felt like it made a difference.
Well, the solution is he should build on it. And if we take away his pressure, he's not going to.
The property owner could landscape too, right? I mean, they could landscape a 4-foot hedge and they could landscape the property.
Can you put like 20-foot trees all behind it?
Yeah, you could landscape.
We can't require that either.
So we proposed that very solution for other neighbors when they've come and wanted to do 6-foot fences along 7th East. And in other circumstances where similar issues were coming up. So I agree there probably are other solutions out there as well. I still can't get around the criteria A, where it has to be 80% open.
Right.
I don't know if it's a 6-foot fence, the way I read the code, it has to remain 80% open. This wouldn't remain 80% open.
But that's not a standard of approval. That's a criteria for when they could be considered.
Right, the criteria.
It violates that. It doesn't meet that criteria.
But the code is the italicized point, not
It
this.
meets criteria E, I would say, exceeding allowable height limits in the cases where it's determined that negative impacts occur because of noise, pollution, light, or other encroachments in the rights, safety, and security and aesthetics of the area. I mean, it would at least meet one of those. I mean, I agree that it doesn't meet A, but it meets E, which would see you meet A. It would at least trigger you enough to go down and look at whether you meet the standards or not. That's what I was trying to figure out.
I just don't see how that's not the other standards could apply, but if it is exceeding the height and it's not maintaining 80% of the total area, I mean, are we saying we only have to meet one of these?
That's what I was seeking clarity on.
I thought we clarified we didn't actually have to meet any of them as long as we took into consideration the 3 items listed in the italicized point in the text above of A3. Right? Isn't that the actual standard, Nick?
Can we get some clarity from the staff on this?
No. So this section of code is very, very confusing. So when you, and frankly, it's not very well written, but when you read through the additional height for fences, there are 3 things that have to be determined. And that's what we talked about earlier. And then what it says about the A through H part is that you can grant extra height under the, and this is what it says, under the following circumstances, subject to compliance with other applicable requirements. And so, and if you look at the structures A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, after G, before you go on to H, there's a semicolon and then the word or. And so how I would interpret that is that not all of those are going to be applicable, but the ones that are have to be addressed. So, for example, there's things in here about fences around schools. Well, if it's not a school, that's not applicable. There's things about avoiding the walled-in effect in the front yard in a residential district. That could be applicable. So I think what makes this hard is that some of these are written as actual standards, and some of them are written as here's situations where you can seek additional fence height. And I know that that's not great advice, but I think what, as you read through this, I think if it applies to this situation, then I think that it is something that you have to make a finding about. The finding, for example, if you're not a corner lot, is it's not a corner lot, that's not applicable. I think that's the intent of how this section was set up.
Can I
So
take
you would have to make a finding that they're proposing a fence height in excess of 6 feet and won't meet the 80% visibility? But that doesn't apply anyway?
Well, I don't know how you say that doesn't apply, or make a finding that, but yeah, you could make a finding that if it's over 6 feet, then it has to meet that.
And even with the or, which isn't in our table, which would be helpful to have actually, and after G, I still don't think it's just purely up to our discretion as to which of these criteria apply. If it applies, it applies. If it situationally, based on facts, doesn't apply, then it wouldn't apply. But I can't get past that personally.
So commissioners, I would like to propose that we try to tie up this discussion. If anyone is ready to make a motion, that we can then have further discussion if we need to, and a vote.
I'm ready to make a motion, but I'm not sure that's how the group wants to move forward.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this issue who has not had a chance to weigh in? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion, Sarah.
Right. Based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission deny the special exception request PLN PCM 2020-00926 as proposed, because evidence has not been presented that demonstrates the proposal complies with the standards listed.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any second?
I'll second.
sorry, who was that? Adrian? Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Sarah and a second from Adrian to deny the petition. A yay vote is a vote for denial. Maureen, Yes. Amy,
Yes.
Adrian,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
John,
Yes.
Matt,
No.
Andres,
I'll vote no.
Sarah,
Yes.
Crystal.
No.
Okay. We have 6 yays and 3 noes, so the motion passes. Thank you all very much. All right, now we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an alley vacation at approximately 968 East Elm, case number PLN PCM 2020-00999.
And it is me again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. You got all the good ones tonight.
All right, let's share my screen. All right, so I am presenting on behalf of Myra Lima, who has since changed positions within the city. So she wrote the staff report, and I will be letting you know what her reviews is. So the application is for an alley vacation. It's a request by Jonas and Danielle Stapleton. They are the owners of 968 East Elm Avenue. They're requesting to vacate the eastern portion of the alley between 1000 East and Lincoln Street. The alley portion they would like to vacate, it abuts 4 separate properties. And the request is in order to acquire the property between those 4 homes. So here is an aerial of the alley. You can see it runs between the Lincoln Street and 1000 East, and then the portion of the alley towards the east that they are requesting to vacate. There are currently 2 structures within this eastern portion of the alley. So both of the structures were built without permits, and they are in the public right of way. So structure number 1 has been, it's being used by the property owner at 2188 South 1000 East. The property is to the south. And then structure number 2 is being used for the property at 980 East Elm Avenue. So structure number 1 was built in approximately 2003, and then it was rebuilt in approximately 2016 or 17 based on aerial photos of the area. And then structure number 2 was built between 2012 and 2015. The property owner came into the city to ask about building a detached garage, and at that time was informed about the public alley. They proceeded to build the structure without a permit. They sold the property in 2015. And then any enforcement on these legal structures in the public right of way would be the responsibility of engineering and civil enforcement. While considering this request, the first consideration is the unpermitted structures that obstruct the alleyway, but were built without those permits. Consideration 2, policy. So section 14.52.020 of City Code states that alley vacations will only be considered when the proposal satisfies a lack of use, public safety, urban design, or community purpose. The applicant provided a narrative as to how the alley vacation meets these policies. They spoke to lack of use, and stated the access has been blocked off on the public right of way for years, but the structures have also contributed to that lack of use. And staff does not believe there is evidence to show that the alley would be underutilized if the structures were not built. Aerial photos indicate the corner property at 980 East Elm Avenue incorporated the alley into its yard decades ago, but there was no curb cut at that time. And the eastern portion of the alley has not been used as a right-of-way even before the structures were built, but the potential to use it was completely removed once they were in place. Public safety, the applicant's narrative stated, if our alley is not vacated and the current illegal obstructions are removed, it will expose our alley to severe safety concerns that exist in the through alley immediately west of our block. Comments received from the Sully Police Department and neighbors support the applicant's claim for a lack of safety. And so while the crimes have happened in the area and staff is not disputing that, there's no evidence provided to indicate the alley is the cause of those crimes. With this section of the alley being closed off to public access, it is unlikely that its existence is substantially contributing to crime and unsafe conditions. And likewise, there is also a doubt that a dead-end alley would be safer than one that connects to the two streets. And, you know, like I said in my previous staff report, there is the eyes on the street where the having more people, having that through access would have more eyes on the street and potentially increase the safety of the area. And then for the urban design and community purpose, the applicants state that the reuse of the alley as private property is more beneficial to the community, which staff disagrees with. The alley connects streets and promotes active transportation such as walking and biking. There's no community benefit to closing the alley and absorbing into these properties because it would only serve those private property owners and not the public. Consideration 3 is utility access and maintenance. Code defines an alley as a public way within a block, primarily intended for service and access to abutting property by vehicles and not designed for general travel. The subject alley is being used for essential services and therefore there is no lack of use as claimed. Staff requested input from Rocky Mountain Power about how accessible the infrastructure had to be. They did not provide a comment in support or opposition of the proposal to vacate the alley, but they did state that if vacated, the cost of maintenance would increase and the restoration of power during an outage could be longer, which could pose a safety issue for their staff members. If the alley is vacated, an easement will be likely to guarantee that the utility company has access to their infrastructure. And then consideration 4, master plan policies. Initiative of Plan Salt Lake is to promote connectivity through mid-block connections, and the Sugar House master plan speaks to orientating garage towards alleyways as a mean to promote infill development and walkability. The Sugar House master plan states that in Sugar House, alleys have traditionally been incorporated into development patterns, and many alleyways currently serve both residential and commercial use. This is one of the factors that contribute to the pedestrian orientation that many of the well-established neighborhoods embody. The Sugar House Community Council did provide a statement in opposition of the closure. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission forward a negative recommendation to the City Council for the proposed alley vacation. While the vacation of the alley would benefit private property owners, it would create challenges for the operation of an essential community service. If the alley was used as intended, it would support the city's overall vision of neighborhood mid-block connections and walkability. Thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Are there any questions for Amanda at this moment? Is the applicant here?
Commissioner Scheer, if I could ask Amanda a question. On the presenter list we had the name, it was, I'm gonna butcher this, Hanim Sappington, but there's
yes. So they might have logged in under Danielle.
Okay, I see Danielle, so I'm going to make Danielle
Yes.
panelist. So so the applicant is available.
Yes.
Hi.
So, yes, go right ahead. Please state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Danielle Sappington. Sorry about the Hanem part. That's a name I go by to personal friends. I'm Danielle Sappington, and this is my husband, Jonas Sappington. As we prepared our presentation today, from the staff report and the Sugar House Community Council letter and some of the comments that were made, we believe that our situation and the proposal that we're going to present to you for a solution have not been communicated correctly. There's some misinformation out there. So we're hoping that our presentation now will naturally correct this misinformation and give you a clear and true picture of our position and what we're actually proposing.
Hi, my name is Jonas. Thank you all again very much for your time. I'm going to try and be as short as possible. And thank you, Amanda. I think she gave a very nice, clear-cut presentation. I appreciate that. In fact, some of the things that I felt were unclear before, I think she cleared up. Specifically, I think some people have misunderstood in the past that the structures that exist, that we were using those structures. And so in that case, that we had built those structures, and now we're asking that that property be turned over to us. And of course, that comes across much more as kind of a land grab, as some people have said. Briefly, we have a family of 6. We have 4 children, and we've lived here since 2010, and we like it a lot. When we moved in, there is a portion of our backyard. I was going to attempt to share some photos, but I think that might slow things down, and especially with my learning curve here on WebEx. But let me just describe that when we moved in, there was a portion of our backyard that looked like, to us, that it belonged to our property, although it was an odd shape. It was like a little extra box on the south end of our property. Didn't really make sense, but we were told by realtors and other people, like, yeah, this is a extra little storage for you. We lived with it like that for a long time. And then as we are looking to improve our home, remodel, maybe even rebuild, it became obvious to us we really need to define and figure out what's going on back there, because one of the structures kind of seems like it could be part of our property, is what we thought. So we're just trying to get to the bottom of this, to be honest. And then we realized we had an epiphany. This is not our property at all. This is public property.
Through research and
yeah, we also found out that it's been known that some alleys get vacated. Our block is small, but it's kind of a unique, nice way to look at things, because the block immediately to the east of us, the alley that runs east and west, has been vacated, and those homes and properties are now using what used to be an alley. The block to the west of us has not been vacated and still exists as a through alleyway. And so there's a nice little science lab here, I feel like, where we can look at what it's like with, what it's like without. Our particular alleyway, as Amanda described, is blocked through illegal structures that were put there by owners essentially before our time, I guess.
any of us.
So it is physically blocked halfway through, and that is actually kind of what we're proposing, is that let's go ahead and make this legal, let's make it right, and not change anything physically. So what we found out, though, is you know, considering all of our neighbors and everything involved, talking to the city, we were recommended that we talk to engineering and transportation, that there's plenty of things to consider here. And we didn't want to rock the boat. However, we are excited to move on and make our house a better place to live. So option A, the way I see it, is if we removed those illegal structures and kept the alley as a throughway, we keep everything public. So the pros I see is that there would be no illegal structures, obviously. Rocky Mountain Power would have additional access to the 3 poles on our block. Well, it would only be additional maybe for 2 of them, possibly. The third pro might be the city could possibly do something nice with this space. And I respect and appreciate all of those things. The cons, however, I feel like for keeping the alley public is that I don't honestly see our alley as a priority on the city's list for limited funds that could be made to improve that alley, that space. Just immediately to the south of our block, we have a greenway where the S line runs, and that's where you get tremendous and wonderful foot traffic and bikes and everything. And then of course on the north side, we have a nice sidewalk for the public. The block, or our alley, actually terminates, because our alley would terminate if it was vacated at 1000 East, because east of 1000 East, that alleyway that ran east and west has been vacated. So it seems odd that someone would travel through our alleyway for biking or walking and then just have to return up to Elm or over to the greenway. It's kind of like when you're here, you can really see it. It's just kind of an odd space to have a pedestrian walkway. Another con is when you compare our alley to the one adjacent to us, it's not really a suitable place for walking. And I'm referring to the alley to the west of us, as Amanda described. It's dark, and there's a lot of trash buildup. And in fact, there's a lot of transient and kind of homeless activity and camps, places where people live. So it's not really a great choice for any kind of use that I can see, like for pedestrians or for cars, when our alleyway is just going to terminate on 1000 East. Another con, the removal of these structures will be costly. That's just unfortunate. And I don't even know who that would belong to, because whoever put them there, and it's not the property of the people who are using them. So that's a good question. Also, there would be, once the structures are removed, then there's the paving to get the road to go through there. Another con, the garage structure that belongs to property Joseph on 980 Elm is a very nice looking structure. It's a complement to the neighborhood. And I'm sure Joseph would really like to have that as a structure. So us, my wife and I, applying, we really have to consider our neighbors and what we're doing here. Trent is our neighbor to the south at 2188 on 1000 East. He has a storage structure in the alleyway as well. That's structure number 1. He would lose that. Another con, we're just trying to be good neighbors with those considerations. Another con is the plowing or whatever takes place during the winter. It's just extra snow removal. And the big con I see is when we open up the alleyway all the way through east to west, it creates kind of an entrance and an exit for what could be unwanted traffic, specifically crime. And that is evident to me and everyone who lives in this neighborhood. All the comments unanimously from people who live here were confident that what we see in the alley immediately to the west of us, which is the through alleyway, is just a lot of bad traffic, blight, neglect, and theft. So if that's option A, to remove these illegal structures, option B might be to vacate the whole alley. The pros there is where the owners would now be empowered to make the area nicer. The alley would be closed to unwanted traffic. 87% of all the homeowners abutting the alley have signed and are in support. The cons are, if we opened it all the way, if we vacated the alley all the way, we are going to restrict access to Rocky Mountain Power. The pole that's in the middle of our block would now exist in someone's backyard, and an easement would have to be created to probably facilitate their use. Property owner Aaron, our neighbor at 956 Elm, he would like to keep his, and he's to the west of us, by the way, he would like to keep his access to the alleyway. And so he was the one person who did not sign the petition for fear that the city might vacate the entire alleyway. And the third con that I listed is our other friend and neighbor, Christy, at 2187 Lincoln. She uses that portion of the alleyway to access her backyard. So there's a lot of like personal stories in all of these things why vacating the whole alley is not ideal either. Option C is a partial vacation, which is what we are proposing. And I feel is a great solution.
Mr. Sappington,
Yes.
Can you wrap it up because your time is
I'm so
up?
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead and wrap it
I'll
up.
wrap it up. The pros are, if we vacate only a portion, then we are preserving all the access that Rocky Mountain Power needs and is required per their notes. 100% of the homeowners are on board with this, and the alley would be closed to unwanted traffic. The residents are empowered to maintain and beautify the area. The only con that I feel, to be honest, is that the city, that property no longer belongs to the city. So if the city had plans, I would love to hear about it. But I just feel like I don't know that we're a high priority on that list.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by partial. Is that the proposal that you've been shown to us? Where
It's the part,
the
yes.
eastern half is closed?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed to know. Okay.
And I had a little bit more, but I would like to just, we'd like to end, and then
Okay.
let's open it up for
All right,
questions.
thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant or for staff? At this time, before we do have a number of people who I think are here to speak on this issue.
The staff has outlined in the standards section that we have to follow, you know, that the department divisions are on board. It seems like they're not. And also they outline that, you know, that's the preference of the city to vacate a whole alley and partial. And you sort of responded to that last part. Never mind, continue on. I'll ask this question later.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. John, are you online?
I am still here.
Okay.
So
Okay, great.
Judy Short's here representing the Sugar House Community Council, so I will unmute her and allow her to speak.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. Now, we noticed this the same way we always do, in the newsletter and with a flyer on people's porches. We had a number of neighbors from the community at our land use meeting. And we also took comments from the website. And I won't go over who owns what and when the buildings were built because Amanda's done a good job with that. But in Sugar House, if you look at the future land use map, there are a number of alleys. And in general, we've taken the positions the alleys should remain. They're part of the fabric of the community. Many of the alleys provide access to a rear garage for a home or business. Alleys can be for walking or bicycling, and many folks walk the dog through the alley. There are connections through the neighborhood. And the city is rewriting many of the housing ordinances currently in an attempt to make it easier for people to add more housing to the city. There's a big shortage of housing, and in an attempt, the population is expected to grow exponentially. If you read the current drafts of those ordinances, most of them call for parking to be on the street rather than within a parcel. It would mean that more units could be built on those parcels. And parking on the streets is already maxed out. But if we keep the alleys open, somebody could build an ADU or a tiny home or a duplex, and some of the parking could be handled by access off the alley. This allows opportunity for a garage with an ADU above and parking for both the house and the ADU, if the lot's too narrow to fit the driveway off the street to the ADU. And that is the case in Sugar House. Some of the lots are very deep. And I have to say, the city has no plans for this alley. They have no plans for any of our alleys, other than just to keep them all open. Those of us that have an alley periodically have to go back there with our ground can and take the debris and the weeds and all that ourselves. There's some comments about crime, particularly in the alley to the west. And what that house really needs to do is put a fence along the alley. This section of the alley doesn't seem to have the foot traffic because the ends are both blocked off. There's a lack of use only because those buildings are there. And we don't think this alley is substantially contributing to crime, and we can't speculate on the future. We're amazed when the alley is vacated, the land is split to budding owners at no cost to the landowners. We're never going to see our infrastructure for lights and electricity buried, and it'd be important that there be easy access for the power company. I don't know if you've ever seen the power guys come with their access through your and I's backyard with their truck. But your backyard isn't the same when they leave. So that's not, I don't think, a good option. Our September storm is an example where we don't even know which tree may fall where and take out which power pole and throw a neighborhood into darkness for days. The city is going to repair the easy access trees and power poles first. And there's nothing that prevents the homeowners on Elm from building a fence along the alley if they want to secure their yard. There doesn't seem to be compelling reasons to close the alley, so we can't support the application. And the city council will have the final say anyway. We'd like to have a letter from engineering that tells us exactly how this all gets resolved and whether or not the property is absorbed into the parcels or what happens. We'd like to understand the rest of the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And now the general public, and each of you will have 2 minutes. I believe we have, John, do we have Danny?
Yes, we have at least 2 new ones, and somebody who spoke at the earlier public hearing. We can check in at the end with them. So maybe we'll start with Danny Tremblay.
Right.
Danny, can you hear us?
I can, yes, thank you.
Great, you have 2 minutes, please.
Great. I didn't come prepared, so I'm going to wing it a bit because there's been a lot of great facts that have been presented. I own, and my wife own properties 974 and 980, which back up to the West Alley. We've been there since 1997. It's no fun to pick up syringes back there, which is regular occurrence. It's no fun to walk in on people having sex back there. It's not fun walking in on people doing drugs. We've had 3 kids there and a grandchild. It's always been a security concern. I don't believe that the alley adds to the community in any way, shape, or form because of the corridor, the tracks corridor, and the distance between the tracks corridor and Elm Avenue is very short. We're talking, what, a couple hundred feet? There's no need for a car to get off of 9th Street to get onto 10th Ave without going through Elm Avenue, which is a very wide avenue. There was talk about having the alleys so that there would be room to put a garage back there, to have a garage. fun fact, the lots are so small that it's not permitted. The homes already take up too much of nearly all of the permitted buildable area on the lot. So even if you wanted to put a garage back there, the lot size is not permitted. So for those reasons and all of the reasons that have been enunciated before, I am fully supporting the idea of vacating the lot. It simply doesn't make sense to keep moving. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
All right. It looks like we have Trent Toller who would like to speak. Trent, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm the property owner on the 2188. I would also agree that I think this is in the best interests of all. This is obviously has been this way for decades. The city, I'm sure, has known about this for decades. I do want to touch on access, utility access. Two of the poles are within very easy access. I've talked to both of crews that have visited those poles. They said they had no issues because there's concrete driveways, there's road, there's no real issue getting to them. And as you probably know, of course, multiple neighborhoods, including the one I live over in Redondo, in 1500 block, there's full of distribution lines in backyards of people's home. I mean, this is not an unusual situation. Obviously, it's always better to have a power line running right along a large roadway, of course, but that's not always the case. And I don't see that as a necessarily that big of an issue. But I'm not a city engineer, of course. Otherwise, my other concern is that if the city does want to take back this, at this point, there is no alleyway there. There's no pavement. There's grass, trees, plants, as you say. So those two main buildings. I think there's some smaller sheds, maybe. That would involve completely rebuilding that existing alleyway. And my question is, would the city get around to that, or has this become just abandoned corridor full of torn up buildings, which is an eyesore and then attracts crime? Because obviously there's a lot of other higher priorities in the city for development and upgrading alleyways and upgrading roads to more walkable, and also touching on what Hanum said, that there is already a very large, the rail line just to the south is heavily used by pedestrians and bicyclers and so on. And this is a short block, and I don't really see how opening up that alley would suddenly cause an avalanche of use, because there's already a road to the north, which is a nice sidewalk, and there's the huge avenue for travel, for pedestrian and so on travel to the south along the rail line. So
thanks, Mr. Toller. Your time is up at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
Thank you for your comment.
It looks like the next speaker would be Genevieve. Genevieve, you have 2 minutes if you'd like to speak.
Hi there. Thank you so much. My name is Genevieve Tungi. I own the home at 980 Elm Avenue. We purchased our home at the end of 2019, and the garage located on the alley was built several years before we purchased our home. I know that the risk of danger and crime has, if the alley is vacated, has already been mentioned, but we do have several neighbors on surrounding streets that have experienced theft, vandalism, squatting, threats to safety, and they do have, their property is fenced. They do still experience these issues. Another concern I wanted to address is the issue of accessing power lines. During the September storm, several of our neighbors did lose their power, and there were no issues, barriers, or delays at all in access. They were fixed without an issue using our driveway. And also to address walkability. I'm a walker. I understand the importance of walkability. Our alley is located just behind Elm Avenue. I'm not one to typically take alleys. And I think the type of people that do typically use the alleys in our area, are homeless people, and they you know, typically vandalize the area and make it unsafe for our children. We have children as well. And that is all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, it looks like we have Forrest Good. Mr. Good, if you'd like to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'm the property owner at 2187. I purchased the home in May of 2019. And this was after my residence, which previously had an alley that went all the way through. My property is east of 1000 East of the subject alley that is that has been given back to the property before I purchased it. And so I just wanted to voice my support of vacating it back. I just, you know, to the point of accessibility to power lines, I have a project, and a commercial development project that's in my backyard that has been going on for the last year. They actually had to bury a power line that went across the parking lot before then, and I have had Rocky Mountain Power as well as utility companies working in my backyard, and I never had a problem with giving any of them access. And I just feel like there's no difference here with the subject alley in the proposed plan, where the property owners would be more than happy to make that property, that subject alley, accessible. I just also wanted to voice my support for the Parley's Way S-Line promenade that is south of the subject alley, which is a fantastic infrastructure for moving people, and I use it often. And again, there's no real point of having people go through this alley just to turn right into the street, which is a dead end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the only person I have left to speak spoke at the Edgecombe public hearing.
I see someone named Aaron Stevenson.
Oh, yes, they just popped up. Thank you for that. It looks like we're gonna have a couple more too. Aaron Stevenson, let me unmute you here. Go ahead and speak. You have 2 minutes. Thanks.
Hi, yeah, I'm Aaron. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm the property owner at 956. And as you can see, 956 and 960 both have large garages that span the width of the lot. Now 960 doesn't have access built onto the garage, but my property does. And that's why I didn't want to sign on, because I knew that the city's policy and preference was to vacate an entire alley when this is proposed, because I've been a couple of these meetings before and seen this happen. So, and that was my concern. I currently don't use it to drive into those garages, but I want to be able to at some point. And the owners at 948 also park their vehicles on the back of their lot, and they access that through the alley. And then of course the owner at 2187 basically uses it as a driveway. And you know, there's a structure on the back of that lot that is also a garage that she doesn't, it's not used, but could be. So yeah, I mean, my concern was specifically selfish for me, because I want to use it as a thoroughfare to be able to park my vehicles back there. Once I have doors, but they're not like rolling garage doors. I do have 2 wide doors. They're just hinged. They're not very convenient. But yeah, I had no issue with what the Sappingtons were asking for. except I was concerned with my usage of the alley. But yeah, I mean, I've always found it weird that those somehow there were things built in the alley. I assumed that somebody had, you know, vacated them properly, but I guess it turns out that's not the case. So, yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, my reasoning for why I wasn't supportive, because I didn't want to just say,
Okay.
yeah, give it up.
Thank you for your time.
It looks like the next speaker will be Kimberly Colton. Kimberly, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm a property owner at 2186 Lincoln Street. I experienced most of the alley problems that people have spoken about, and my property at one point was fenced, and Judy is right, it does need a fence again. But I would say most of the crime that I've experienced is not due to my lack of fence, while there have been people that pass my lawn that has been the problem. I wonder how much crime and 911 calls that 2187 100th East has versus me, or if the city has studied alley adjacency and crime or 911 calls, if that's something that they've looked into. I've had my daughter followed down the alley. I've seen urination. I've seen my own things stolen from my front porch and taken down the alley, and lots of vandalism, and someone coming into our home. I want to touch on utilities. I see that if the utility access was an issue, I think that Rocky Mountain would have had those structures demolished already. I also wonder if the utility access is an issue, can neighbors come together and pay to bury lines? I'm also curious what justified the closure of the alley between McClelland and 100th East, and how that differs from our situation. Lastly, the community use. I agree with Danny and many of my neighbors. S-Line is where I see people walking dogs and riding bikes, and on Elm Street. I don't see any of that traffic on the alley north of me. I mainly see drug deals and transient camps. I don't think that, like Danny said, that there's space for ADUs. If there is, I wonder if we would get approval. Last comment, even if they're not personally taking possession to rebuild houses, I'm sure that those people would, on the proposed vacation, would rather have a community garden than a pass-through. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think we spoke to everybody except for this group that was here for the EdgeCom. Did you want me to check and see if they wanted to speak on this item as well?
Yes, please.
All right. This is for Jim and Anna. Did you guys want to speak on this item as well? Your hand was still up, so we just wanted to make sure you could speak if you'd like. Are you there, Jim or Anna?
May not even be there anymore.
Yeah, they may have stepped away. So, okay.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the, excuse me, before I do, have we received any emails on this?
We have not.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion and a motion.
Can I just make a quick clarification on the email things? We have received emails that were put in the Dropbox, but we haven't received any additional emails for people wishing to speak.
Thank you very much.
I want to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, thanks.
So I want to throw out some thoughts and hear what other commissioners think. I don't live far from this area. I actually have an alley behind my house. And in 2007, I demolished my typical sugar house, one car leaning garage. And I did build a garage that faced the alley. So if, and before I moved in 20 some years ago, that alley had been vacated, I would not have had that option. And I did that mainly because I didn't want my whole backyard to be concrete when I rebuilt the garage. So it actually gave me a little bit of yard, but I liked that I had the option. And it is hard for me sometimes to look at an issue and not think about it in the broader sense of this city as a whole. And I've been typically against alley vacations of this nature because it inhibits future landowners and it takes away their options. And ADUs are a part of that. An ADU may not fit on these particular parcels. That's something I also consider. And I'll just tell you, I walk my dogs every day and I use the alleys. I walk them. I see my neighbors walking them. We're not vandalizing anything. I'm not suggesting remotely that they don't experience that, because I do experience that in my alley as well. But to suggest that all users of alleys are up to no good is patently false. I actually walk in this area too all the time. So it's not so much about foot traffic though for me as it is property owners, future property owners, and their ability to do things. I don't know when the alley on the east was vacated. That would be nice to know if staff is aware of that. But I feel like there was a time period when they were just always readily approved, and maybe now we're a little bit more stringent on them. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to hear other people's thoughts, because I am very concerned about the broader implications of alley vacations versus the minutia of these particular parcels. But I'd like to hear what other commissioners feel about that.
So, commissioners? I can tell you that from my perspective, I agree with Amy that I don't like to see alleys vacated either, unless there's some particular reason, and that they serve a useful function in the city, and that actually the crime would probably be a lot less if people were passing through there quite a few times with their cars or their bikes or walking their dogs and so forth. More of a sense that you were being observed than you get when the alley is partially blocked off the way it is here. And we know that to be true from research about crime.
Yeah, I guess my opinion is I can see it both ways. I think a well-used alley is a great thing. I think an underutilized alley that's not maintained by anyone is a place for trash to gather and for people to hang out. And if you do put a fence, which I heard multiple times, now you're just walling off the alley and creating a dead zone where no one sees what's going on back there. And it does create a sense of unease. I can see that for the homeowners. My question, I guess, for the city is, if these garages and things have been built for many years, why haven't they been addressed at this point in the history of this particular alley?
I don't know, Amanda, if you wanted to jump in, but one of the reasons is that the garage on 10th East is actually relatively new. And like we said, they came in to request a permit, and they were informed at the time, not the current property owners of the properties before, they could not build a garage, and then they did anyways. And so, obviously we wish we could drive down every street every day, but until somebody actually complained about it and found out, it was too late, the garage was already there. And so since that time, engineering has actually been looking to enforce on that, but they have to give people that opportunity to request to have the alley vacated. And so that's why they submitted their application. And that's why we're moving forward with this application, is as a part of, this is kind of a last effort before it's enforced on.
So, but I want to make clear something about this that the applicant themselves were also clear about, which is the people who live on the corner with 980 with the relatively new garage that was built illegally, they are not the applicants for this.
Right.
Okay, I just want everybody to understand that although obviously they did testify here, I mean, the people who built the garage no longer own the place, I guess, but the people who will be affected by this have been testifying
But wasn't
as
that
well.
Wasn't that 2003? That was quite a while ago.
No, there's a new garage there
Well
from
over
2017.
What? Okay, I must have
Structure
misheard.
2.
Was it structure 1 that was 2003?
No, that was it was, but then there was another one replacing it, actually.
Okay.
Correct.
So, is that right, Amanda?
Yeah, so the first structure, we're looking at aerials, of course. We don't have building permits, but it was about 2003, and then it was replaced in about 2016 or 17. It was rebuilt.
Okay.
So all of these have been within the past 5 years, 6 years. So.
And when the alley is vacated, don't the adjacent property owners get to the center line?
Yes.
So even a vacation won't address a potential encroachment issue with an adjacent property owner.
That's a really good point.
They could potentially do lot line adjustments. We'd have to look at zoning, but that could be a potential path
Or
for
become a
this.
civil issue and they could buy it off them.
Yeah, no, I mean, they could resolve it privately, but I'm just saying if the rationale is that they've already constructed and taken over the alley and it's not usable, they've over encroached on what they would be entitled to under a vacation.
I guess my thought about it is that it's been two life cycles of one building, and then they tore that one down and built a new building. It's been illegally built for that long. That's quite a while. I wonder what the usefulness of the alley actually is. So like I said, I can see both sides, but unless there's a plan, it's good if there's congruent alleys that continue down the blocks, but it seems like it's been pretty hit and miss with what is been absorbed and what is still remaining. I guess, is there any overall plan for what may or may not happen with the alleys in this area?
No, I think unfortunately, I think that's a citywide issue, right? Maintenance of alleys, upkeep of alleys, and there are definitely, engineering and transportation would love to be able to spend more time, money, efforts to improve them, and I think there's some push with the current council administration, but I would say there's not an actual plan in place right now.
I mean, in my own community council and when I attend the other community councils in my area, lack of maintenance of alleys, crime in alleys comes up every meeting. And I kind of struggle with the why alley myself personally.
Okay, are there any other comments that other commissioners would like to make regarding this? Or
I'll speak to that. Let me just say something, Crystal, if I
Sure.
can. I'm in downtown and we have seen a lot of those alleys vacated over the years. And now the city is doing everything they can to get them back. And, so just because for the moment the alleys aren't being used doesn't mean we as a city want that permanently removed from our options. So I get that where you are and where I am are very, very different, but these same kind of conversations happened on planning commissions years ago and people thought, we'll never use these alleys. And now we desperately want them. So that's just my 2 cents for Crystal.
Well, and also I think regarding that, Sarah, we're also talking about 8 or 9 story buildings only 2 blocks from here, in the developing Sugar House district there. So you can see down one of these alleys to quite some tall structures. So it's not out of the question that there would be extensive redevelopment over time here.
I guess I could see that as two different things, an alley versus a mid-block walkway. And I think mid-block walkways are really important in large-scale developments. But I think somebody would have to purchase the entire block to make that a feasible kind of concern. I think that could be something that could be kind of pushed for if somebody were to buy the whole block and then we were to rezone the block and then build a larger scale project. That to me is when I would be concerned personally, but it's just my thoughts.
I mean, I think I find structure 2 that was just recently built extremely frustrating. I don't know how you enforce on that. It's just, it's not, I mean, it's extremely frustrating. Although the fact that structure 1 has been in place for nearly 20 years means that alley really has not had a through street for over 20 years. I mean, even though there's been 2 buildings or 2 structures, it's 20 years of that alley being only a partial alley. So I'm not sure there's really I think it meets the standard for lack of use in the staff report because of that.
I would agree.
But structure 2, that's ridiculous. But
Okay, so are we ready to make a,
I have a question for staff really quick. That other alley that was vacated by Kensington, do we know when that was vacated?
The alley to the east?
Yeah.
Myra doesn't know for sure. I did just ask her about it, but she believes it was in the 2000s. But
Is this, sorry to interrupt you, Amanda. This is between 10th East and McClellan Street. Is that correct?
yes.
So earlier you guys brought it up, and so out of curiosity, I looked it up on the Atlas Plats, and it was actually vacated in 1956. The east to west running alley.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Great.
If you were talking about the alleyway north to south running through that block, that was in 2008. But the one going east to west, it meets it was in 56.
Oh, I see.
Okay, is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Who feels confident that they can make a motion that they can get enough people to sign on to? Or even not?
I'll make a motion unless someone else wants to.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, I generally don't like alley vacations. I think some unique aspects of this one, including its proximity to the S line and like all that work that's been done that we really are trying to encourage traffic and movement along there. I think that makes this a unique spot. But based on the findings, so I'm going to motion to approve here. And so, but based on the findings and also the staff report, the policy considerations for the alley vacation and public input I received, I move the planning commission for a positive recommendation to the city council for the alley vacation proposed at PLN PCM 2020-00999. Do I need to make findings on this or not?
Oh, sorry. I believe you should make findings on it since it's
so because of structure 1 being in place for over 20 years, I generally find I generally find that it meets the criteria A, lack of use, and if it meets that standard for a reason to do it, and then in terms of the individual items, that's where I got the fact that the city, there has been repairs and work on that sort of alleyway for an extended period of time. It seems like we haven't needed that direct access. And that I already dealt with 2, and then to deal with 5. I don't think this is really contrary to the because of its proximity to Sugarmont and Elm Avenue. I don't think it's really contrary. And our intent to really make those thoroughfares to the city, I don't think this is contrary to the city policies as the staff outlined.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a second from Crystal. I'm going to go through, this is a positive recommendation to City Council. Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
So this is a really hard one, but I don't agree with Matt's evaluation of the standards. And I'm thankful that the city council is the final decision maker on this, but I vote no.
Thank you. Adrian?
No.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Agree.
John?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Andres?
I'll vote yes.
Sarah?
I'm gonna vote no.
Crystal?
Yes.
All right, we have 6 yes and 3 no, so the recommendation to forward it to the city council with a positive recommendation passes. And now we will move on to our final item on the agenda. Do we need a 5-minute break?
Yes, please.
Okay, 5-minute break.
Bed.
5-minute break, please. So planning commissioners, if you are here, would you go ahead and turn your cameras back on, your videos back on? Thank you. All righty. So our final item for tonight is the Tradition Point Apartments Design Review at approximately 1425 South Jefferson Street. Case number PLN PCM 2020-00661, and I believe David Gellner. Or is it, I'm sorry.
David is presenting for Eric.
Okay. Yes. Okay, David.
Okay, David Gellner, you noted the case number. This is the Tradition Point Design Review for apartments or additional height. I'm going to share my screen. Tell me if, is that coming in at a large enough?
Yep, it looks fine, Dave.
Okay, so this is property located at approximately 1425 South Jefferson Street. It's a request through the design review process for additional building height, approximately 14 feet. This is in the CG General Commercial Zoning District where 60 feet is allowed by right. And so they're asking for an additional 14 feet through the design review process and rendering of the apartments, and then staff is recommending approval with the conditions listed in the report. Give you a little bit of context. Here's the vicinity zoning map. The parcel is outlined on that map. It's 3 parcels actually. One of them is a sliver parcel in between the 2 larger parcels, and they will be combined as part of building on this property. It's as I mentioned, Zone CG. It's got frontage on both 1400 South and Jefferson Street. The Jefferson Street frontage will be where the building faces to the front. Surrounded by a variety of zoning, CG mainly to the west and north, and residential business a little bit to the northeast. It is adjacent to RMF 35 to the east, and there's a 14-foot unpaved alley between the subject properties and where that RMF 35 zoning starts. And then to the immediate south, it's zoned RMU, residential mixed use. Quick overview of the neighborhood. The subject properties currently contain a kind of older triplex that's in a state of disrepair. That would be the top left picture. Immediately to the west across Jefferson, some smaller scale development and automotive uses. On the north side of 1400 South, some office uses, and then the bottom right picture shows you that 14-foot alley in between the subject property and the RMF 35 zoning to the east. Quick facts on the project. The total properties when combined will be 0.45 acres, and they're proposing a 74-foot high building that's 7 stories, which would include 3 levels of parking, 2 above ground, 1 under grade, and 4 residential floors above that parking structure. Total building length, 130 feet on Jefferson, again, 78 units, mainly studio or 1-bedroom apartments, and they are proposing 75 interior parking stalls. Material palette is also in your staff report packet, but it includes stucco, some composite siding, brick, concrete, and wood siding. And so we're reviewing this against the design review standards and also the general zoning standards. Some of the site plan elements, as I mentioned, it has frontage on 1400 South, and the main front of the building will be on Jefferson. The parking structure will be entered about midway on the property, going in and out from Jefferson, and there are pedestrian entrances facing both Jefferson and 1400 South. And then that aforementioned 14-foot alley between the subject property and the RMF 35 zoning to the east acts as somewhat of a more natural buffer, additional buffering for the property. So the setbacks are 10 feet on the northeast and west sides, and then on the south side, there's a 15-foot required setback. A little bit of neighborhood context just for development potential. Tried to lay out to the east, probably 2 stories is the potential highest it can go. Property immediately to the south is zoned RMU, so 75 is allowed by right, 75 feet, 125 through design review process. And then the neighboring CG properties are all allowed by right to go to 60 feet tall, or up to 90 feet with the design review. So although the properties as they exist today around this site are maybe not built up to their full potential, if they were to be redeveloped in the future, they could go to higher heights. Couple elevations. The west elevation, this one shows the parking garage entrance in the middle, and the ground floor includes a lobby and leasing area and that parking. East elevation, which would face the alley, you just see an opening towards the parking structure. The north elevation towards 1400 South, there is a pedestrian entrance, but you're mainly seeing the parking structure as well from that elevation. Key considerations, we did look at the master plan compliance, and this would be under the Central Community Master Plan, which encourages things with housing and compatible development, and felt that it met those standards. And also Plan Salt Lake, providing access to a wide variety of housing, creating safe neighborhoods. So it did meet those. In terms of the other zoning standards, the the general commercial zone, we have the general design standards found in chapter 21A37. Those are very limited as they apply to the CG zone. Basically, they have to have an operable entry for street-facing facade and parking lot light shielding. In that chapter, we don't specify in the general commercial zoning district glass percentages or any of the things that you see in a lot of the other zones. Eric did note that the entry facing 1400 South was of some concern. It doesn't lead into occupiable space, and it's a very plain entrance, just a doorway into the side of the building, which is largely the parking structure. And then again, the relating building masses to human scale, there are 12 design standards in that chapter. Some pause as to how that 1400 South elevation interacts with the street and the solid to void ratios and how it relates to human scale, that it's not very pedestrian friendly. Here's the elevations again. The one circled at the bottom left is the one referring to that there's a pedestrian entrance which goes into garage space, but it's not a very inviting facade along 1400 South that is very pedestrian friendly. So planning staff is recommending approval with the following condition: that building entrance allowed along 1400 South includes some pedestrian oriented design elements, whether that's awning, something to be more welcoming and show that it's pedestrian friendly. And Eric included a number of those in the staff report. And revising that ground floor facade along 1400 South to include a solid to void ratio and give it more character that would be more in concert with the neighborhood. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff at this point?
I do, Brenda.
Yeah.
So, David, I'm looking at an aerial on Google Earth, and I went by this location Monday at 10 a.m. I'm curious about Jefferson Street. Is this considered a public street all the way to then the access to that apartment complex? Or is some of it considered an alley, which I read in one of the comments? So I'm a little confused as to exactly the status of this portion between 1400 South and the apartment complex to the south of it.
It is a public, as far as I know.
A public what?
It is a public street.
Public street. So, and when I look at this aerial, in front of what was European Tech, whatever it's called, that is vacated that is part of this project on the east side, they have a number of stalled parking spots. Are those on their private property?
Where specifically, if I can get a clarification, where are you on the east side?
I am looking directly adjacent to the parcel. Well, I can't find the address, but it's the one with the European. It's the one, so you have the apartment complex on the south, and then you have the first building, not the triplex, but the other building, which was a European Tech, like,
okay,
car place. They have a bunch of stalled, not angled or parallel, stalled parking stalls striped out. Is that on their property or on Jefferson Street? It looks like it's on their property, and so I'm just trying to figure this out.
I apologize, I'm not 100% sure on that. I believe it's on Jefferson, but I'm not 100% sure.
Because I got to tell you, at 10 a.m. on Monday, every one of those was taken. So people are parking there, and I would like to know who's parking there. They were full. And so I'm curious if, and there was signs, that this parking is only for this business, blah, blah, blah. which is now defunct. So I'm just curious as like how, if this is private property, then how, maybe the applicant can address this in their presentation. How then street parking is going to be handled along Jefferson Street if this is part of their property line? Because there's clearly nothing available.
Commissioner Barry, if I could, I'm just looking at the kind of the street view here, and you can see where the sidewalk doesn't go south on Jefferson Street.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, but the right-of-way width stays the same. And so I would say this might be a combination of maybe some of their property, but I would say the vast majority is public right-of-way right now.
So he's only going to build up to where the building actually ceases?
Yes, it looks like those buildings probably are built right on the property line or very, very close to it.
Okay. And so I guess I would then be curious if the applicant is going to mirror this stalled parking approach, or they're going to do angled parking, or what, because they were full. And so just a note to the applicant, I'm curious about the treatment of that. Okay, that's all I really wanted to clarify before the applicant started.
Looking in the staff report, I believe transportation did comment on the parking.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get the applicant to speak.
Okay, I stopped sharing my screen. Mark Garza should be on the call.
I am.
Thank you, Mark. Can you enlighten us some about your project?
Yes, I will try my best. So Mark Garza, I'd like to introduce my team. I got Rich Day, as well as Gray Garza, Jory Walker with Beecher Walker, and Josh Hart on the call. All ready to try and...
Can I interrupt you really quick? Sorry. Josh Hart, we're not able to move him from the attendee to a panelist. So if you would like him to speak, we can unmute him at any time and he can speak, but he's not going to be able to unmute himself like you're able to do that.
Understood. We'll have him raise his hand if he needs to chime in. But thank you for that notice.
Okay, thank you.
So mentioned the team. Also want to thank David for stepping in for Eric. Both David and Eric, we're working with David on our Sohi property that will be coming before you later this month. But both of those guys in the planning department have been incredible to work with. So I just wanted to make note of that. They've been great and very responsive. As David mentioned, we are proposing a 7-story building with 5 levels. So it's 5 levels of residential, above 2 levels of podium, and like you mentioned, one half a level, basically subterranean. We're proposing 75 stalls parking within that structure, basically giving us nearly a 1-to-1 ratio. So 78 units with 75 stalls. So 1-to-1 ratio. The code actually only requires 67 stalls. So we're above that. That is planned. We want that. We have seen in our market studies that parking is still a major consideration with tenants. And, you know, what we heard loud and clear from the neighborhood was the on-street parking, as well as Commissioner Amy brought up earlier as well. Just to hit on her question on that parking, John was correct that it is a partial, the way it currently sits. That was before we took control of this property, but those parking stalls were built halfway on the right-of-way and less than half on the property itself. That would be changed. We would build out that full right-of-way to include sidewalk, park strip, and so forth. And then the parking, as David mentioned, would be parallel. I'm going to ask David or whoever controls the technology to turn over sharing to Jory Walker. I'm going to have him kind of give some highlights of the architectural, the amenities, I'm going to keep talking for a little bit, but I'm going to then turn it over to him. Hopefully not taking too much more of your time. I know it's been a long night for you guys already. But some of those amenities will include a on-site leasing management office, outdoor courtyards, as well as a club room, the parking structure, as well as the building itself will be a secured access building, only entered with a fob or keyless entry type system. Again, talking about some of our concerns as we've gone through this process and hearing the neighborhood and so forth. Safety, lighting was one of the comments that they brought up several times, wanting to make sure that the building had adequate lighting that provided for a safe and walkable community. Again, I think as far as safety goes, I think the ability to have the keyless secured entrance will also help. During our design phase, and again, Jory will go into this, but we thought about the code and what it said about frontages on both sides of the street and having that walkability. But we thought, if we could direct everybody to a central focal point, thereby kind of controlling and having a better vantage point of everybody coming in and out of the complex itself, might add to a better security. However, again, having the staff report and working with staff, we have taken the liberty, and Jory will go into that. We did some quick modifications, and I think we tried to spice it up a little bit, but Jory will talk about that. Again, I'm trying to rush through this again because I know it's a long night. So you can bring me back to try and answer any questions that I forget. But really, again, we're here before you tonight requesting a height increase of 74 feet. So going from 60 foot, which the code currently allows, to 74 feet. This is a 14-foot increase from the code. And really it comes down to water table. Once we were able to go through some of our due diligence, we discovered through our geotechnical report that the water is down to about 9 feet below grade. Obviously with the parking structure and so forth, and kind of the market, what's telling us to provide for this parking stalls, going down very deep is problematic. It's not only cost prohibitive, but it's also challenging to the neighbors around us because it would involve shoring, it would involve dewatering the site, massive trucks going in and out, removing material. It's quite the process. So raising this building up 14 feet, which we don't feel is too big of a increase, really, in our mind, is a better fit for the community, keeping those big trucks and everything out of there from moving back and forth. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Jory with that. Jory, can you take over and kind of talk about those things?
Thanks so much. Can you guys hear me okay? So this is a rendering of the building. This was before we received some comments from the city, and so we've added some more punch windows. There's more windows to the front. And the other thing the city was also concerned about was, kind of how are we going to light the building? So we want to do a nighttime shot so you guys can see how the building would be lit and how it would create kind of a beacon in the neighborhood and how it would feel. One of the really cool things about the building is because we want to be able to park the building, we are going 2 stories of parking and 1 story of parking down. And that's the reason we're asking for the height increase. But it's also because we want to make sure the residents are safe and feel safe. And so as they slide their card to go into the parking structure, they can go to the parking structure and then drive the elevators into their spaces. It creates a real high-end space for the tenants. The other thing is the top of the development has a terrace. So the building steps back so the residents have open space to inhabit and be on top of the building, which works really well. Some other things that the staff kind of gave to us as we worked on things is we looked at this pedestrian level. And the first thing we did is they were worried about the articulation of the skin here. So we added more windows across the front. We added an entry into the lobby that I'll show you that works. And we added more punch windows just to create a more pedestrian scale. And the other thing we did that we felt was very important, I always tell people that working with cities makes architects better. And so having the city say, you know, we really think you need to have this elevation have more of feeling of entry. So what we did is we added entry to this side of the building so that both sides of the street had entry. So we had an entry here, an entry here. I think it's a really good observation by the city. And then what we did also, what I think was a real good observation of the city said, it'd be nice to feel like your tenants were walking into some kind of a lobby. So now you come to a lobby here to the elevator. The leasing office is here with glass here and glass here. And there's glass here going to parking structure. So this becomes more of a kind of a transition lobby to the elevator and to the stair. And so we made those changes to kind of address what the city was talking about, or what they thought was important. And so we did add more articulation to the first level and more ability to access from both of the street corners, which we felt was very, very important and was a good recommendation from the city. Any questions we can answer for you guys?
Jory, can you touch on the amenities real quickly? The outdoor, can you bring up that outdoor patio?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Garza, but you are out of time. So,
No, okay, we're good.
So
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Maybe we can see that in our questions. So I'm going to bring it back to the commission to see if there are any questions for the.
I do.
applicant.
I have a
Yes.
couple questions. So I can't really visualize your treatment on the 14th South side. I do think the city was correct. It's very, I'm really unimpressed with 14th South, and unfortunately, the nature of this location, 14th South is just by default going to be your more visible spot. No matter how much traffic you bring to your residence on Jefferson, 14th South is just a lot more visible because of that quasi dead end. So I can't really tell exactly how inviting that will be, but I'm going to trust that staff will make it so. But I'm concerned about the rest of 14th South in having it be very blocky and uninviting visually. Are there things that you are willing to entertain for the northern end of that building to make it something more pleasing to pedestrians and to that street?
Yeah, I
Is
think
that
there's things we
something-
can do. I think we can do planters and create more an entry feeling there. We started to play with it. We've kind of gone here and we've kind of added on. I'm sorry, the computer's so chunky, but we've kind of added awnings and entries here. We can do some planters, some planting and lighting to make it really feel like there's entries on both streets.
So Jory, what about the northern part of that building though? Or the eastern part, sorry. The eastern part of that side.
Right here, right?
No, so you've got your entrance, but go east. You've got the rest of that facade on 14th South, that is.
You're talking here?
Yeah, I'm talking
Yeah.
the rest of that length.
I think that can be dealt with landscaping and lighting.
Yeah, because I am also concerned with what staff brought up, the ratio of blocking it, and I think the way it's presented now, I'm not impressed with how that is going to turn out. So I just want you to
Yeah,
open
Take
I'm
another
gonna-
look at that.
I'm going to have to agree with Amy that I think that is a real weakness of this project is the 14th South facade. The improvements you made along Jefferson seem reasonable, but and good. But the 14th South facade is really not acceptable the way it is, especially it's really just just plain Jane and very uninviting. So
I think we can do things there. I think we can bring some of the facade down and bring some of the punch window feeling down, and then some landscaping. We've got plenty of room for landscaping and stepping there and do some trees and stuff.
I think that
Okay,
would
good
help
to
a
hear.
lot.
Yeah, I think we definitely do something there.
I'm just gonna make another comment to you, Mark. When I was there Monday, I saw a couple of people get walk underneath your yellow tape and walk around to the backside of that European Tech building. I don't know what they're doing, but you may want to check what's going on your property there.
Unfortunately, it's a daily occurrence, and we monitor it as best we can, believe it or not.
Yeah, they got out of a shuttle that was an airport shuttle van. So I don't know what they were doing though.
It's scary stuff, no doubt.
We could
Probably
carry
the
the
bankers.
same material down, that's coming down here, of this material here and material here.
Yeah.
And then do plantings across here and some trees and really kind of make it feel more like part of the building than parking structure.
Yeah, it definitely needs to not feel like I'm walking
Be
past a
more
parking
engaged.
structure.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I think
That
you
makes sense.
definitely have that sensibility.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We can definitely bring the facade down so it continues down the sides here, and then do some planters. That might be maybe 2 steps, maybe a 2-foot and a 4-foot planter, and then some plantings so it really softens that edge.
Okay. Okay. Right. Commissioners, does anyone else have any questions for the applicant at this point? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing to see if we have any people who would like to speak.
Yes, commissioners, it looks like we have Christopher Tribe. Let me get him unmuted. Hold on 1 second. All right, Christopher, you are unmuted. Go ahead and speak.
Great, thank you. My name's Christopher Tribe, as he said. I'm a student at the University of Utah in the School of Architecture and Planning. When I first looked at this project, I was initially concerned with the potential blockage of daylight to the surrounding neighborhoods, specifically the multifamily housing immediately to the east of the proposed building. After running an annual daylight exposure analysis on these multifamily housing buildings, the difference between the 60-foot building approved in the zoning code and the proposed 74 building makes no measurable difference in the annual daylight permeation. I support the request to allow the 74-foot building allotment. Thank you.
Why, thank you so much for your research. Is there anyone else?
The only one is still Jim and Anna from the original
Yeah,
Foam Drive.
yeah, that we can safely assume that they are not.
Yeah, I believe so as well.
Okay. All right. Hearing no other discussion, I will bring it back to the Planning Commission for a further discussion. Concerns?
I guess I would just direct to David, given what I articulated and Brenda also articulated. On that 1400 South side, do the existing conditions you've listed in the staff report adequately address some of the things that Jory said they were willing to look at? Because I don't necessarily think it does, but I want your opinion on that.
They were, the conditions Eric included in the report were very general. You may want to be a little more specific on some of those changes that you're desiring to be very clear on.
Yeah, just because Jory mentioned, bringing down some of.
Yeah, can I clarify that a little bit? And maybe I can show it here in the model. I'm gonna turn on the colors for the model so you can kind of see what the colors look like. And what I think you're saying is, and make sure I'm on the same page with you guys, is right now, all of the material colors end here, and then you have the parking structure begin. And what I'm thinking would work really well is if this material that's on the wall here came down and ended to the ground here. So it felt like the building architecture was continuing down to the ground. So here and here, and then across here, we would do, 2 levels of planters that came up to the windows that created a planting wall and a green space that I think could really soften the look of that. So I think that's kind of what you're asking for, is to have sometimes in architecture, we let the side be a side and the front's a front. And sometimes what it means is maybe we need to address both of these as fronts.
Yeah, I think you do, Jory. I think you've got it down. I think you've got a good approach. So I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with what you're talking about doing is going to work. Now I'm just gonna kind of talk it through with David on staff of like how to word it so that it's open enough for staff to work with you on and not overly prescriptive, but enough direction that staff understands what we're after.
Totally agree.
Okay, so if, Madam Chair, if there's no other, since I've manipulated or monopolized this, if there's no other comments or questions, I'm ready to make a motion.
I was going to ask if there is others at this point who wish to comment about this particular project and the design.
I would just say I agree with the proposed changes, and I appreciate that there's not 75 different materials on the project.
I agree with that too. All right. So Amy, why don't you go ahead with your?
Okay, I just want to clarify with David one point. If I add a condition for staff to work with the applicant to vary up the 1400 south facade, is that sufficient direction, but open enough for workability?
I think
it already says that pretty much in the.
No, it talks about the ratio of solid to windows. It doesn't talk about materials or landscaping or really.
Well, pedestrian oriented design elements is pretty specific.
Yeah, so I mean, I will take my direction from staff. If David feels like our discussion that I've brought up is sufficiently addressed by the conditions already listed in the staff report, or do you feel like I need to add another one to give better direction to staff for when they work with this?
You may want to enhance condition 1 just and define some of those pedestrian oriented elements to include landscaping, color changes and things. So it's just a little more specific on that, not just a suggestion.
Okay, so since the motion sheet does not actually list out the wording of condition 1, I'm going to take a stab at just adding to it.
Do you want me to pull it up on screen?
Yeah, so I can see it along with the motion sheet. That would be very helpful.
Oh, okay, then Jory, if Jory could stop sharing, I can. All right. Let me see. Sorry, trying to get it.
No, thank you, David.
Is that giving you the condition? Yeah, sure.
You know, Amy, one thing I might recommend is that you reference the fact that the 1400 South is actually also a front facade.
Okay.
Maybe that is the way to
okay.
Suggest the kinds of changes that
we discussed.
Need to be, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a stab at this. I hate this part of adding stuff language, so I'll do my best. Based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the design review petition PLN PCM 2020-00661 for traditional point apartments, subject to complying with the following conditions. 1, to treat 1400 South as a front facade, alter building entrance along 1400 South to lead into occupiable space and to include more pedestrian-oriented design elements that will include materials being throughout the 1400 South facade, as well as potential landscaping additions. And 2, revise the ground floor facade along 1400 South to possibly include a solid to void ratio of windows and doors, more in character with the neighborhood.
Second.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Was that Crystal?
Oh, it's Maureen.
Oh, hi, Maureen. Okay, I have a motion from Amy and a second from Maureen. So I'm going to go through my roll call again here as I find it. Okay. Maureen.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Okay. Amy.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Agree.
John.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Andres.
I'll vote yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
And Crystal.
Yes.
Thank you. This passes unanimously. So we are finished with our agenda for tonight.
Thank you.
And I'm going to adjourn the meeting unless there's objection. Okay, we
No.
are adjourned.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Certainly the president gathers a lot of media attention, and people are wanting to know about the president, who's running for president, vice president, at the top of the list of those running for office. But I'd like to say, as a former elected official,